Okay, it's now recording. Okay, so this morning we finished everything I was hoping to finish in the morning. This whole afternoon until 5, I think, until 5, we're doing PLS. So if you don't have partial least squares or PLS, SmartPLS, Khalil, I think you emailed out an email about it. You'll want the most recent version. So they came up with a new version like 3 weeks ago, 2.3.7, or no, 3.2.7. The 0.7 is critical. We'll be doing stuff with the 0.7 that wasn't available in the 0.6. So make sure you have 3.2.7. How do you check that? We'll check it right now. Before I get started in PLS, was there anything that came to you during lunch and you're like, oh, I wish I had asked that, and I should cover it right now? Okay, if it comes to you, I'll be here afterwards. I do plan on staying today. Even if we finish early, I will be here till 5:30, and I'll answer questions one-on-one if there's time. I have no clue how long it's going to take us to do PLS, because again, I've never actually done it in a boot camp. I've taught it elsewhere in classes and seminars. In fact, I should tell you, what I'm teaching you in this boot camp, this master class, I've taught, what we worked on today is an entire semester in undergrad. What we're doing with PLS is an entire semester in your doctoral program. What we're doing tomorrow is 2 separate 3-credit courses in your doctoral program. And what we're doing in, on the 3rd day is also 2 separate courses in your doctoral program. So we're doing like 5, I didn't count, 5 or 6 classes in 3 days. So anyway, it's a lot of stuff. I don't know where I was going with that, but there you have it. Okay, I'm going to sit for a second. We're going to open up PLS. If you don't know where your SmartPLS is, if you're in Windows, just hit the Windows key and type smart, and hopefully, but you got to spell it correctly. It's a funny thing about smart, and it should be the first thing that pops up. Okay, excuse me. How many of you are planning on using PLS for a subsequent study, some study coming up? A few. Good. Good. Well, maybe I should talk about PLS before I show you PLS. That might be good. I also have slides on PLS I'm not using. Let me close these ones here. But let me show you in the slides folder. I have here, there's a PLS all-in-one. These I actually inherited from another professor who inherited them from another professor. We've updated them periodically. I haven't updated these a ton. It's just a ton of slides, mostly reference material for PLS. I will not be going through these slides, like, at all. But I did put on the first page the link to the playlist I recently made. It's 17 videos of how to use SmartPLS 3. Christian Ringel, who made SmartPLS, it actually references them. It's kind of cool. He called me up the other day and said, hey, I love your videos. What can I do for you? He's the one who got you the free license. So hooray for Christian. He's a really nice guy, by the way. So nice. Also, the references section, there's a whole section on just PLS in the references section. So if you decide you want to use PLS, there are like 25 references there of all the latest and greatest, and also all the seminal pieces on PLS. So there's that. I'm going to go over a couple slides, but that's it. This is what we're going to do in PLS today. I hope we'll get through all this. That'd be amazing. How to get it all up and running, assessing your inner and outer models, essentially your measurement model, your structural model. Effect sizes, somebody asked about validating p-values. We're going to use effect sizes in PLS. We're talking about mediation, multi-group effects, interactions, and method bias, which is kind of a silly thing in PLS. I'll talk about later. Okay. For those who aren't familiar with PLS, it's partial least squares. It has been around, honestly, as long as covariance-based statistics, just it hasn't been as popular. Covariance-based SEM is like Amos or Lizrel, or most other SEM applications use covariance-based SEM. And what does that mean? They're based on the covariance matrix. They're based on the chi-square. They're based on the correlations between all the variables in the data set. That's what covariance-based statistics are for. And the way you evaluate a covariance-based model is by comparing the model you propose, whatever your model is, to the actual covariance matrix of variables. And if it matches, it's called good model fit, right? And that's how you evaluate a covariance-based SEM model. PLS is different. It doesn't use the covariance matrix as its basis. It uses just variance, all variance shared with variables. You don't have to understand that really. The thing you need to understand is why and why not to use PLS. Because this gets messed up. There are papers out there that say PLS is the one and only true version of statistics. Nobody should use covariance-based. And then there's a covariance-based camp. There's zealots as well. You may have zealots in your own fields in various camps. There are two distinct camps here. And so I've seen beautiful battles between these guys where they'll say PLS is the solution to all your problems or PLS is the devil reincarnate. So anyway, here's why you should actually use it. And this is out of the horse's mouth. I've taken this from many different papers and summed it up here. Good reasons for using PLS. Legitimate logical reasons. If your model is super complex, let's say you have 100 variables. Covariance-based statistics, because they use the covariance matrix, they're exponential. It grows exponentially. Every time you add another variable to the covariance matrix, you're not adding one more parameter. You're adding as many parameters as there are other variables in the model. And so, I got food in me. I'm hungry. This is great. And so if we have 2 variables, we have a 4x4. If we have 3 variables, we have a 3x3. And so on. Every time you add one more variable, you're adding way more than one more parameter. And so the problem with covariance-based statistics with massive models is they can't fit it in memory. I mean, our big computers, we're getting better and stronger and faster, but the applications still can't handle all that memory churning as you get larger and larger covariance matrices that you're comparing. And so model complexity is one reason you don't want to use covariance-based methods like Amos or Lizerl, but is a good reason to use PLS, because PLS doesn't use this. It uses components. It uses the regressions. It uses this. Okay, so let's pretend we had 4. 4 is good. This is CB SEM. Sorry if that's hard to see over there. I'll try to vocalize as best as I can. So in CB-SEM, you have this matrix, which again could grow out of control. In PLS, it doesn't rely on that. What it relies on, and I should draw the model. Let's say we have, we're going to keep this super simple. We have 2 variables like this, and each one of these variables is measured by 2 observed items, essentially 2 questions in your survey, right? 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah? Okay. In PLS, it doesn't use this. What it uses is this. So you essentially have 2 things you need to account for. It's how many things are being predicted at the thing that is as the thing that's being most predicted. Oh, that's a terrible way to say it. Let's say we had another variable with 5 variables here. 5 observed variables. This is a latent variable. And all these are forming this variable here. What PLS has to do is account for this biggest of variables. And so it grows linearly. There's a linear relationship between the number of variables and the complexity of the algorithm. Whereas in CB-SEM, there's an exponential-ish relationship, which is why in PLS, you can handle much more complex models, because it's a linear growth complexity, or complexity growth, whereas CB-SEM is exponential growth complexity. Okay, if that didn't make sense, I'm sorry, I'm a terrible teacher. So if it didn't make sense, all you have to remember, big complex model, use PLS. Another reason for PLS over Amos and Lizral is if you have formative models. Do I have a slide on this, just not here. There are two main ways to measure something latently. One way is by using a set of items that are redundant. I've talked about that a lot so far. That's a reflective model. In the case of job satisfaction, it'd be something like, I love my job, I'm content with my job, I'm satisfied with my job. These all mean the same thing. If you remove one, it's still job satisfaction, right? So the way you would draw that is with arrows pointing out from the latent factor to those survey questions. These things are manifestations of this. But there's another way to measure things, and it's formatively, and that's where you actually turn those arrows around. And if we were to use job satisfaction again, it'd be something like, I love my job, I intend on staying at my job, something a little bit different. I love the people at my job. The work I do is meaningful. These are all very different things. They may be related, but they're different things. Altogether, they indicate, they form this idea of job satisfaction. But if you get rid of one of them, it sort of changes the nature of job satisfaction. And so they're forming the idea of job satisfaction. When you have a model like that, formative constructs in your model, Amos cannot run it. Neither can Lizral. Period. And some people may tell you, well, actually, I can make it work. I can make it work too, but it wasn't designed to do that. And so the findings you'll get from it will be warped. So if you have formative constructs, your only choice, if you want to keep things latent, is to use SmartPLS or PLS Graph or Warp PLS or whatever PLS software. PLS GUI or anchovies. No, that's not it. Adonco. That's a new one. ADA&Co. CEO. He and I had some conversations. Anyway, so you need to use PLS if you have formative model measures. Period. If you're using Amos and you're trying to model things reflectively, even though they're formative, it'll just break. It won't work properly. But you can also use PLS for reflective measures. So it does both. The last one is if you're focused on prediction. This is a little fuzzier. Because of the way models are assessed in covariance-based statistics, based on model fit, they're not based on predictive quality. They're based on model fit. They're based on how well does your model, the way you've drawn it, represent the data. Whereas in PLS, it's about prediction. It's about the arrows, predicting things. And so if your theory is all about prediction rather than about a set of relationships between a lot of variables, well, then PLS is probably a better choice for you because it has predictive analytics. That's a thing. It has analytics for prediction and assessing prediction. So anyway, that's a good reason to use. You can do this in Amos and Lizral, though, and there are ways around it. So this isn't the best. The first two reasons are the main criteria. Like you can't do these two in Amos. You just can't once you get too complex. Bad reasons for using PLS that are cited all the time and make me cringe. People say, I use PLS because I have non-normal data. The reason PLS works with non-normal data is because it will run anyway. In Amos, it just won't run. It won't converge. It won't, because there's too much error. But because the algorithm in PLS is less weighty, it will actually run and converge, if that's the right word in PLS, and you'll get estimates. But those estimates will still be wrong. They'll still be biased by your non-normal data. And you could bootstrap and do things to fix that, and there are mitigation strategies. But you should not use PLS just because you have non-normal data. That's a terrible excuse. And there's a paper published on all this stuff. It's Lowry and Gaskin, actually, 2000 something, that talks about all these. And sample sizes, I hear this one all the time. I'm using PLS because I have a small sample size. That's a terrible reason to use PLS. Again, PLS will run because it's a less weighty algorithm. And so it will actually give you estimates. But those estimates will still be loaded with error. We looked at those those 4 boxes earlier. Sample size, if you have low sample size, you have a lot of error. It doesn't matter if you're using PLS or Amos. There's still error. If you have error, then you're biasing your results. Or, yeah.
So at some point when you are using continuous variables, you reach a point where you need to go to normalize them so that you can run the model. So in this case, I don't need to convert them to logarithm to run my model, because if you can learn the normal level.
Let me see if I understood. You're saying at some point you got to figure out what the normalness of your data is.
Let's say that I have an income, for example.
Yeah, income.
Which is not really, most of the time it's not really normally distributed.
Yeah, it's usually skewed with a big long right tail. Yeah.
Yeah. So to run my model, most of the time I transform them into logarithm.
Correct. Yeah, you log transform them.
Somehow.
Yeah.
So in this case, if I'm using PLS, I don't need to convert transform.
If I'm using PLS, do I need to transform into normal distributions? The answer is yes. Especially since we have this point here, non-normal data is a bad reason to use PLS. So you still need to have normal data when you're using PLS. So transform it first. PLS won't auto-transform for you. Okay.
Just a quick question.
Yeah, please. These are the last slides I have on PLS that I'm going to go over. Then we're going to actually just jump into it. So if you have questions on the topic and the idea, not the procedures, I'll get into the procedures. But if you have questions on this, ask them now.
This morning you have shown us the conceptual model for testing data.
Yeah.
If that's the case, what would you use? Would you go for PLS or MOS?
Under what circumstance?
See, for example, that one is...
The model you showed in the morning.
Yes.
Oh, the big model?
The model,
Yeah. This morning I showed the model we're going to use with like usefulness and decision quality.
Yes,
and all that.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in this case, which would you use, PLS or Amos?
Yes.
And the answer is, it depends.
Because
Is it too complex? The answer is no, it's okay.
No, it's okay.
It's like moderately complex, so maybe not that reason. Does it have formative model measures? No.
Not completely.
No. Is it prediction focused?
Somewhat, yes.
Somewhat, but again, this isn't the hard criteria. It's helpful.
Excuse me.
Do I? Yes. Wait, let me finish this one. So the answer is, this is political. I would use Amos because in information systems research, my field, Amos is more accepted than PLS. And so to get a reviewer to review my paper in PLS is harder than in Amos. In fact, I have submitted papers using PLS and they said, why did you use PLS? Redo the whole thing in Amos. And I had to redo the whole thing in Amos because I wanted it published. Yeah.
But in such cases, we can go for either.
You could go for either. I could have done it in PLS, and I have published papers in PLS that didn't have formative constructs in.
Because it doesn't actually address the complete criteria that we have got. So probably whichever is comfortable.
You can use either in many cases. The only time you couldn't use either is if these criteria are broken. If you had formative measures, you may not use Amos. If you have a super complex model, Amos is a bad idea. You can still maybe use it, but it's a bad idea. But otherwise, you could use either.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yes.
Yeah, about the reason of formative specification.
Yes.
I'd like to ask, like if you have a formative variables, you still can average them and use them in almost.
Yes. Okay, so this is good, and you can do this. So let's say you have formative measures, and you still want to use Amos. You can. You could average your indicators or do a weighted average. And I've advised some students to do this because I don't want them to have to go learn PLS. So let's say we had those 4 measures of job satisfaction. I love my coworkers, I love my boss, I love my job. The work I do is interesting. Excuse me. Then what you can do, you can actually take the average of all those or the weighted average of all those. They're no longer a formative latent construct. They're an average. They're a single item, just a calculated score. And you can stick that in Amos, no problem. No problem with that. Yeah. It's just no longer latent. So you're not accounting for all the error and other degrees of freedom that we could have obtained from that or gone, things like that. Okay, yes?
The word complexity itself is subjective. Only complex means like having P independent variables and 5 dependent variables
Yeah.
and moderating linear.
Is there a number? Is that your question? Is there a number? The answer is it probably depends on a few things. The first is how powerful is your computer? The second is how much sample size is there? Because model complexity depends on sample size. It's relative. If I have 300 in my sample size, I can handle a more complex model because there's just more to draw upon. But if I only have 100 in my sample size, I can't have a very complex model. So is there a number? I'm trying to generate one in my head right now. I would strongly recommend, if your model does not fit on the page in Amos, it is too complex. Really. And you'll see, it's a limited size page. If it doesn't fit, it's too complex. Make it fit, like Cinderella. Oh, holy shnikes. And it ran. And you made it, did it run?
Yeah, I did one. Now
You're rethinking, yeah. Oh, should definitely use PLS. There are reasons. So there are reasons we're told not to use PLS. It's completely political. Yeah, it's because PLS has been less well established and less validated over the years. It's a path dependency thing. We started out with both. We picked Amos and Lizral and ran with those. We developed all these ways of validating, assessing models in Amos and Lizral. And this PLS is a redheaded stepchild. Do you have those in Australia? No, maybe?
Something similar.
Something similar? I don't know the Australian equivalent, but we call it a redheaded stepchild in America. It's the one you forget about and don't listen to. I love my children, but I mean, it's the thing. Okay. And so PLS got ignored. And then finally it started coming back, but people were like, I don't know how to evaluate this. Use Amos. I know that one. And so it is a political thing. Yeah.
Larry and Gaston in 2001 had a reference that you gave about bad reasons to use PLS. Does it also cover good reasons to use PLS?
It does, yeah. The Lowry Gaskin talks about good reasons to use PLS. And in fact, the name of that paper, I should just show it to you. The name of that paper is perfect for what we're talking about. Go to references, search for Lowry. Lowry and Gaskin. PLS, SEM, for building and testing behavioral causal theory, when to choose it and how to use it. Very explicit. When to choose it and how to use it. PLS. So that should work. And we debunk some of these myths about small sample size and skewed data and all that weird stuff. Okay. Anything else? Yes?
Can I ask you, how can I know where the construct is reflective or formative?
This is really good. I get this one all the time. Yeah, how do we know if it's formative or reflective? Essentially, look at the items that it's measured with. If those items are essentially interchangeable, they mean the same thing. If you removed one, you'd still have the same construct. It's reflective. If they're measuring different things, if I could be a rational human being and answer strongly disagree to one of the items and strongly agree to another one of the items, formative. So, for example, I love my job. My job makes me happy. I'm content at my job. I get a lot of satisfaction from my job. I could not answer strongly disagree to one of those and strongly agree to another one and still be a rational human being. So that's reflective. If I love my coworkers, I love my boss, I love my job, I could say I hate my coworkers, but I love my boss, and I'm still a rational human being. So that's formative. It's the criteria is, are the indicators required to be correlated, or are they not required to be correlated and still be a rational human being?
So, is there any requirement for take with data or
is there like a statistical? It's completely conceptual. There are ways you can statistically validate it a little bit, like with a Cronbach's alpha, but even in a formative construct, the items might be correlated. It's just they don't have to be, but they happen to be.
So alpha is irrelevant for formative measures.
Yeah, so for formative measures, Cronbach's alpha is irrelevant because they're not required to be correlated. And so the reliability scores makes no sense.
So why do we have composite reliability?
So composite reliability, also irrelevant for formative measures. Those two things, CA and CR, they are related. The difference is the composite reliability takes into account the factor loading score, the weight, whereas Cronbach's alpha does not. So composite reliability is the more recent and more valid measure. Yeah.
What is your combination of both? So like,
I always include both. Yeah.
sorry, but
Oh, I thought you mean Cronbach's alpha and composite reliability. Yeah, what if you have some reflective constructs and some formative constructs? Because that's the more common. You have mix. In that case, you still have to use PLS. If you have even one formative and you're not going to, if you're not going to collapse it and do a single score, you have to use PLS. Okay, got some really good questions. Anything else before we actually just do it? Okay, let's do it. Here we go. And if you have questions as we go, just bring them up.
I already emailed the link, right? The link to download. So if you are not able to download or set it up, just follow on the screen.
Yeah, just watch.
And yeah, just watch and maybe do it later. But whoever has it, just do it on the screen.
So Christian was really nice. Christian Ringel, he's the guy who made SmartPLS. He called me up one day or emailed me, and then we chatted on the phone. But he said he loved what we were doing, and he said, here's a free, here, let me back up.
2 months free.
Oh, you guys do have a 2 months free full version pro, whatever. Yeah, for 2 months. But back before I made any videos for SmartPLS version 3, I had made some for version 2. SmartPLS 3 came out, and Christian contacted me and said, hey, James, here's a license for you. 2 years license, pro license. Enjoy. Wink, wink. And we love your videos, by the way. Wink, wink. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can make some videos. And I didn't for 2 years. And then he contacted me again and said, James, we love your videos. So I made some. And then I had a chat with him about what features I'd like to see in SmartPLS. And they've been implementing some of them, which makes me really excited. In fact, this most recent version has a feature I requested specifically. But then he said, by the way, if you're doing any conferences, I'll give you free licenses. Just give them out. And so you guys are the first conference in the world to have free licenses to SmartPLS. For 2 months, 60 days. Yeah, so get those studies done. Yeah.
Finish analysis.
Yeah, that's incentive. Also finish your PhD, just be done. Okay, here we go. So PLS is like most stat softwares, is not intuitive at all. It's made by statisticians, not by user interface design people. So the first thing we need to do, create a new project, top left. New project.
You're recording this, right?
This is all being recorded. And I've made 17 new videos on how to do all of this. So new project, this pops up. Name the project. I'm going to call it MC.
RMIT MC.
RMIT MC. RMIT MC. Okay. You can name it whatever you want. You can name it Bob if you want. Or Bundy. Monday. There we go. Once you do that, then a new project's created right here. Again, that was clicking on new project and naming it. So we have a new project, RMIT MC. And it has no data, it has no model, we've defined nothing. So we have to click to import data, but you might not have data yet. So let's go get some data. To do that, we have to make the data. So let's go back to our data set in SPSS. So this was our final data set. I have saved this onto the Google Drive. But SmartPLS does not accept SAV files, which is what this is. It's a .sav. SmartPLS only accepts .dat, .txt, and .csv. So we're going to create a .csv, a comma separated value file out of this. To do that, go to File, Save As, and the Save As type here, instead of using Save As the default, which is spss.sav, we're going to scroll down to comma delimited. The Save As type is going to be comma delimited. And then we're going to name it RMIT MC PLS, or whatever you want. That's what I'm naming it. Okay, save. And so we should have a new data set over here called RMITMCPLS.CSV. The reason to use a CSV or .dat or .txt is because they're lower load files, a smaller resource package, not a lot of extra fluff on them, just the values. So they're faster to operate with. Okay, in PLS now, we're gonna double click this request here. And it wants us to open it up. I'm gonna open up the one we just created. If it's not there for you, go find it wherever you saved it. Or just go pull in the one from our Google Drive folder. And then hit open. Oh, it doesn't take DATs anymore, just TXTs and CSVs. Okay. If you are desperate about following along with this one and you weren't able to make it to that point, get to that point or I'll help you, because you won't be able to do anything moving forward if you don't get to that point. So I'm gonna give you a sec. Anyone need help with this one thing? Oh, good. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So get to that point.
Em làm cũng làm không ổn. Tại vì nãy là
Is anyone else experiencing that error where you import the data it says use student license? There are a couple. This is one of the few things I troubleshoot, because again, if you don't get this, you can't move forward at all. Yeah. So you have and if you go all the way to data, so what happened was, does any of your columns have columns? Okay, here we go. So once you have your data in, it does some useful stuff for you. It shows you right off the bat, it shows you all your data and the missing values, if there are any, the mean, the median, the min, the max, standard deviation, all that stuff. Skewness, what is this? Oh, kurtosis. Anyway, some useful stuff and some summary information about it right here. We're not going to use any of that. Just go ahead and close that tab and open up. Instead, double click on your model icon here. Just double click that. And what will happen is seemingly nothing, except this will show up. Again, I double clicked on this model right here. And this opens up to a blank canvas. We have nothing going on here. We want to create a model. We have a model. It had 2 IVs, 2 mediators, 2 dependent variables. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on latent variable up at the top there. And just click on that. Don't click and drag. Just click on it. And it is now your active tool. Anywhere you click, it will create a latent variable. Kind of magical. So we're going to create 6 of them. Now, it retains whatever the last tool used was. So if you want to not be creating more of these, go click on the select tool. Kind of not useful and intuitive, but it works. So now we're on the arrow, select tool. Let's name these. In our model, let me go back to our model from this morning. This one. Okay, we have playfulness and anxiety on the left. So to name something, you can either right-click it and name it, or click F2. Playful. Anxiety. In the middle, right-click, rename. We had useful. And rename comp use. And right-click and rename. Excuse me. Information acquisition, info ac. And decision quality. Yes.
On the back,
You're on Mac 2-finger click or command click. Did that work? No? I'll come over. So get to here. Let me move this over. There we go. Those are the ones.
thank you.
I have a backup for it too. I just don't use it for any existence.
It doesn't like it.
And no, it doesn't like Amos at all. Okay. So here are the variables. They are red, which in PLS, red means bad, can't go. So what we need to do is add their indicators. The indicators are over here on the left, right here. Hopefully you'll see those. If they don't show up, you might be able to click view. Nope, they should just be there. Okay. So we want to go to playful, pull in all 7 of these. You just highlight them by holding shift and then clicking the first and the last. Just drag them into playful. And they nicely format like that. Don't you wish Amos was like that? Yeah. Anxiety, we're going to do the same thing. Hold them into anxiety. Comp use. Information acquisition. Decision quality. And usefulness. Bigger? Okay. While you guys are getting that all set up, you may, if you've done this kind of stuff before, you may say, well, James, we haven't validated these factors at all. We haven't done like an exploratory factor analysis. And we don't know if these are valid factors. The answer is, yeah, you're right. We could do it in this, actually. You can do validation in PLS, which we will do. So don't worry too much. We did go through and do univariate validation, skewness, kurtosis, and all that. We didn't have to drop any items except social desirability bias, like one of those we dropped, I think. But nothing else did we drop. So we're good. We're good. None of these are formative in nature. If you're using your own data and you have a formative construct, it's really easy to fix it. All you do is right-click that construct and switch between formative and reflective. What this will do is it'll change the direction of the arrows. Notice the arrows here point at the factor, whereas the arrows here point away from the factor. This one where it's pointing to is formative. This one pointing away is reflective. So that's how that works. It does make a difference in the calculations, and like the algorithm is different based on which way the arrows are pointing. So don't just do it willy-nilly. That's a thing in Australia, yeah, willy-nilly. All right, okay. So don't do it willy-nilly. Make sure you have it correct. If it's formative, make it formative. If it's reflective, make it reflective. Don't mix it like all willy-nilly. Okay, here we go. Still, you can't run this. In PLS, you have to connect all the variables to something, to some other variable. Every latent variable has to be connected to something. So let's do a little formatting and then some connecting. If you right-click information acquisition, and then you can select where you want the indicators to align. I'm going to have them align on the right. It just pushes them to the right. Do the same for this one, align right. Just going to make it pretty is what I'm doing. Oops. Comp use, I'm going to put below. Don't know why it's not obeying. Am I clicking the wrong? There we go. There we go. And that looks good. So there you have it. So something like that. Okay, next. Click on the Connect tool up top. Again, not super intuitive. You'd think you could just like click on a variable, click on another variable, or drag, or nope, doesn't work. You gotta click on the Connect tool, and then click on a variable, single click, let go, and then single click on another variable, let go. While it's still Connect tool, click, 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 click. Magic, almost. And now we had a few other relationships going on. I think we had anxiety to usefulness. Ooh, change color. The reason it changed color is because now we had one contiguous model. Everything was connected somehow. Whereas before it was two separate models. But there were these two crosses as well. That's our model. At least that's our theoretical model. Who knows if it's a good model, but it is our theoretical model. Okay. There we go. Okay. Once you're here, we're ready to run. We have a model. We've specified which factors have which items. Now, I'm way out of order here. I haven't talked about latent factors and factor analyses and measurement models, and so we're doing PLS out of order, like I said earlier. So you just have to take a lot of what I say on don't read too much into it, I guess. If you've already done that sort of stuff, then this will be great for you. You already know what I'm talking about. So, quick overview. In SEM, you have a measurement model and you have a structural model. The measurement model is the way we measure latent factors. Every circle here represents a latent or hidden, unobserved is another word for it, unobserved factor. The trait we're trying to capture, like for this one, is decision quality. All of these items here have something to do with decision quality. And by assessing how this set of items is correlated, we can sort of generate what you might call a centroid, but not really, but it's some sort of common trait that is expressed through the correlations amongst this group of items. Same with information acquisition. By their shared correlations within the group, you can sort of get to this thing called information acquisition, sort of the center of their relationships. That's what we do for all these latent factors. And then you have the structural model, also called the inner model. This is the outer model, which we drew it this way because that would make more intuitive sense. Outer's on the outside right now, inner's on the inside. The inner model is the structural model. It's the relationship between latent factors. This is what we're actually theorizing about. We're not theorizing about this stuff here, the outer model. We're theorizing about the inner model, that comprehensiveness of your use of the software leads to better decisions. That is our theory. And so we draw these lines to indicate that a change in this should lead to a change in this. And if you want to know algorithmically how that's calculated, trying to simplify it. Essentially, you have this group of correlations and this group of correlations, and their centers, and the extent to which these centers move together, that is how you end up with the coefficient on this line. That is a drastically simplified version of what's going on. Even I hate getting in the algorithms. It's just, yeah. Okay, I was never one of those guys in school who liked formulas. Like, there's a button for that. Why do I need to memorize the formula? So, there you have it. That's how it works. It's like magic. Anyway, so what this is going to do is going to assess the outer model and the inner model simultaneously. That's the beauty of SEM. You can assess both. In first-generation statistics, like linear regressions, OLS linear regressions, it doesn't do that. You can't say, I have this thing that's not measured, but I want to measure it anyway, and I want to see how it's related to stuff. You couldn't do this. You'd have to draw a line from this box to this box in linear regression, or a line from each one of these boxes to each one of these boxes. And so the beauty of SEM is you can say, I have this sort of unobserved thing that's represented by these other things, and they're related to this thing that's also represented by a bunch of other things. Very complex stuff underneath the hood that is simplified in this software. It's great. Anyway, very powerful. It enables you to run complex models like this. In linear regression also, you can't have mediators. There's actually a tool for it now. Preacher and Hayes have a process tool for SPSS. but also it doesn't allow for latent mediators. So SEM allows for latent mediators while controlling for stuff, while comparing groups, and it's just great stuff, great stuff. So anyway, that's PLS, or that's SEM, here's PLS. Let's run this. To run, you click on calculate. That is intuitive. But then you end up with this mess. I just want to calculate. Which one do you choose? It depends. If you don't know, choose this one right here, consistent PLS. The answer is PLS algorithm doesn't account for the latent correlations, or the correlations between all latent variables, like covariance-based statistics does. And so it's been argued that PLS inflates certain coefficients. Anyway, to account for all that, they came up with consistent PLS, which allows for the reflective measures to be better accounted for, more consistent with covariance-based algorithms. So if you have any reflective constructs, like we have all reflective constructs right now, if you have any reflective constructs, use PLS consistent. If you have all formative, doesn't matter, you can use either, so just use PLS consistent. Same with bootstrapping consistent, it's the same idea. We'll use that one later. So for now, click on PLS consistent. And we'll use some of these other ones later, but not all of them. There's so many things you can do here. This pops up, you're like, I just want to run already. And what do you click on? It depends on what you're doing. For what we're doing right now, we just want to get the model running. So we're going to skip over this partial least squares tab and make sure path is selected right there. If path is selected, then we're good. Now this is out of order. You should be assessing your measurement model first, but I just want to show you how to run it. And then we'll go back to our measurement model. Anyway, so all the defaults are great. Hit on start calculation. It'll run, and hopefully it'll bring up a report. If it didn't bring up a report, just go over here to the left, next to where we had indicators, and there should be a calculation results, and you can click on report, and that should open it up. We have a bunch of stuff here. What do we want to look at first? We want to look at the model first. So to get back to your model, up here at the top, we have multiple tabs. We have the report tab and we have the model tab. Go to the model tab. Zoom back out. And you'll see your model with numbers on it now. Hooray! These numbers are different. Out here, they're loadings. They're the matrix loaded. They're the outer loadings. We have a bad one there. Huh. Essentially, what these are is the extent to which each item is correlated with every other item in that group. So, for example, this guy right here, which is decision quality 11, is very strongly correlated. That's an R of 0.89. It's not really an R. Work with me. It's a relationship measure, 0.89, which is really high, very strong. We want to see anything over 0.7 is great. Anything over 0.7. So we look here, there's 0.6, there's 0.3, not so great. We want these to be consistent with each other. So 0.3 is going to throw off our center, and we're trying to relate centers of these latent factors. And so if one of them is like dragging us down, we want to probably lop it off. So we'll take care of that in a minute. The value inside the latent variables, which you'll see is in this one, this one, this one, this one, but not in these two, is the R squared. R squared is for anything that is predicted. These two aren't predicted by anything else, and so they don't have an R squared. R squared is the percent of variance explained in that variable by all other variables predicting it. This one is predicted by these two lines, which is comp use and usefulness. Those two predict it. 35.7% of its variance is predicted by those two variables. Pretty good. And we'll notice that it's not much by comp use, it's mostly by usefulness, as evidenced by the regression coefficient, the beta. This is the standardized regression weight. It has a lot of names. But bigger is sometimes better. Smaller is usually not better. It can be negative, as evidenced by these ones. Again, it's just an inverse relationship. As one goes up, the other goes down. These actually This one makes a little more sense. Anxiety has a negative 0.076 regression weight. With usefulness, that means that as anxiety increases, usefulness, perceived usefulness goes down. That makes sense. Probably not actually statistically significant because it's pretty small. Anyway, but that's how you would read this model. More to do. Yes, please stop me if you have questions. The negative coefficient, what does it mean again? It's an inverse relationship. So as anxiety increases, usefulness decreases, or perceived usefulness, really. If you have a negative loading here on your outer model, on your measurement model, that's an indication of something weird going on. Typically, you have a reverse-coded question you forgot to re-reverse. Do I have any of those? I don't see any. It's hard to read these ones, but I think we're good. But if you had a negative indicator loading, again, sign of a reverse-coded question, or sign of a formative factor that you didn't specify correctly. So if we had negatives in here and they weren't reverse-coded, they might have just been formative, and I measured it reflectively. So you'd have to switch that around. Yeah. All negatives? Wow, that's amazing. All negatives? You win. I have never seen that. I will look at that sometime. Will you take a screenshot of it, and then I'll look at it another time. That's weird. Yeah, so let's say we theorized a positive relationship. All the literature says there's a positive relationship, and yet we observe a negative relationship. First off, let's check to see if it's even significant. Answer is probably it's not significant because it's such a low value. I'll show you how to see significance in a moment. But let's say it is significant. Counterintuitive finding. What on earth do we say to that? The answer is there's probably more going on than we thought. Probably there's some mediator or moderator we're not accounting for. So maybe it's, for this particular context, it's people who grew up with a computer in their house versus people who didn't grow up with a computer in their house. We should separate those two groups, and we may find that for one group, it is a very strong positive relationship. The other, it's a very negative relationship. The negative's just winning out right now. And so we'd have to separate those, and then we'd find the truth, the approximation of truth. Okay.
But we have already done the data collection, and we don't have any.
Oh, you don't have any more you don't have a moderator with you. What do? You say that in your report. You say, probably there's some moderator we're not accounting for. That's the only way we can explain this. Yeah. And then they'll be like, okay. Collect more data. Call me in a year. Did you have a question? Yeah.
What's the correlation between is that point before we try to find?
Yeah. So we should have actually identified this prior to running this model. We should have identified that there was a weak indicator in this factor and already removed it or adjusted for it somehow. So let's go back.
Power?
No. The screen covering.
Oh. System shutdown. Is it just tired?
Yeah. Yeah, it should have beeped beforehand and we have to keep it going. Okay, it'll come back up in a minute.
It's still recording here. Hopefully, I think so. Yeah, I'm still recording. It wasn't a power shutdown. It was a room shutdown.
Yeah, it's environmentally friendly. If we're in here too long, it thinks that.
Okay.
So
you guys need to breathe more.
Yeah.
It thinks we're all dead. Well, while we're doing that, I'm going to grab some water.
So, while we are waiting for this, you can have a coffee if you want, if you feel sleepy or something.
can't go back
What time? One.
That's it. He got his time.
Yeah. So maybe up to 5 hours.
Okay.
Down.
Okay.
I've never but it should be the minutes, like say continuous system. Running from my laptop.
just on one day.
Do you want the lights on 5?
Actually, really useful to us.
What's that?
Very, really useful to us.
Yeah, okay.
Just in time for thanks for
Okay.
approving.
It's all right. What's your name?
Sriman.
Sriman. Yeah, okay.
VIT.
Yeah. Now you are a lecturer, right?
Lecturer at MD University.
Ah, okay. Where?
CPE.
Okay.
Central Council.
Nice to meet you.
My presentation is due next month.
What presentation?
The final and
Completion.
Completion.
You're doing PLS?
No, MOS.
Yeah.
But I have lots of questions.
Of course.
Now, it's
Every
really
time you analyze, there are questions. Yeah. Very good. Yeah, but
But they look like second. Oh, yep. And then just like we repeated the indicators. Okay. So sometimes we can't do because variables that has variance. Meaning everybody has the same thing for that question. So it's usually some items repeated versus these. So say you found an item, there's no here. Usually I didn't really grab this page everywhere. Okay, so that would be I just think that's I'm pretty sure you may be able to use it. That's why that's
the CPLS, algorithm. The ones inside is basically the R. So that means basically R. And the ones out, and so that's just a break. Yes. And is there a cell criteria? It can be negative, basically. Is there a criteria that it has to be solved or something?
No, there are different sizes. So I got 0.5 is very large. Yeah, 0.3 is small. It's doing something.
And the ultimate that basically all has to be. Oh yeah. And the next one would be to get
We'll talk about I guess second order. Sure. And I have a video for second order. So you look at second order. You make small words. You put it on the second
Works now. You can continue, and if it's needed, you can have another copy.
Okay,
guys. We are back.
Okay. Still recording, so we're good there. All right. Several things. I had several questions about measurement models, about second order models, about mixed models. We're going to get to all of that stuff. Don't worry. I just sort of jumped in to show you what is on the model. I'm also going to show you right now how to find the p-values, but then we're going to go back and we're going to do a factor analysis in PLS. And we'll talk about formative and reflective. We'll talk about second order. We'll talk about mediation in here and multi-group effects and interactions. Hopefully we get all that. Yes, let me get my, it is 2:13. We have lots of time, good. Okay, so the way you get p-values is, actually, before we do that, if you look at the output, we generated a report. It was the second tab up here, right there. If you go back to that tab, there's a lot of stuff we can look at. I know this is small up here, but you see it in front of you, hopefully. There are the final results of path coefficients. I can't zoom in here. Let me just do that. Okay. We can look at the path coefficients, which is the default. That's what we're looking at right now. That's also what's on the model. We can look at mediated effects, the outer weights and loadings for factor analysis with reflective factors. We're going to look at this. Formative factors, we're going to look at this. We can look at latent variable correlations, the R square, which we've been talking about, the F square, which is the effect size for validating those p-values and the effects. We can look at validity and reliability, which we'll look at for our factor analysis, including discriminant validity, collinearity, which we'll look at for method bias, and model fit, which is weird and irrelevant, but we'll talk about anyway, because people want to talk about model fit, no matter what kind of model you're using. So let's do this. You may notice in your path coefficients, there are no p-values, which is unfortunate. In order to get p-values in PLS, go back to your model. You have to calculate again, but this time choose bootstrapping. Someone asked in the break, does it really matter if I use consistent versus the regular algorithm? The answer is the results will be fairly similar. Not identical, but almost identical. So you'll be good. Don't worry about it. So I'm going to go ahead and do my consistent bootstrapping. There are a lot of options here. Let's just look at a couple of them real quick. If you go to the bootstrapping tab, number of subsamples, what is bootstrapping? Bootstrapping is where you take, let's say you have 300 respondents, and what you do is with those 300, you eliminate 10 of them and replace their responses with the mean. There are other ways to do it as well. And then you do that again randomly 500 times, or as we prefer, 5,000, or if you're in front of a lot of people and you're running, you know, quickly, let's do 2,000. 2,000 times is sufficient. 5,000 is ideal. Anything more than that, you have diminishing returns. But this is going to randomly replace rows in our data set with the mean or median or whatever algorithm it's choosing 2,000 times. And what does that do for you? What it does is it normalizes things a little bit, reduces error a little bit, and also gives you more reliable estimates, and also allows you to generate p-values for these regression weights. Everything else, don't worry too much about all this. The defaults are actually really good. You don't need to change them. So just leave the defaults there. Let me zoom out again. And everything else we're going to leave it the same. Hit start calculate, and it will take some time because it's doing this 2,000 times. I remember reading papers back in the old days where they would bootstrap 200 times because that took an hour. But now, there we go, done. And this generates for us some p-values. There they are, p-values right there. So we can see which effects are significant. If we want to see for real, you just have to open up this first column. Here are the actual effects we're looking at. And so we can see that the relationship between usefulness and decision quality is significant. Why are we getting NA on some of these? Playfulness to compute. Playfulness to usefulness. Why would it give me an NA? I've never seen that. I know you're laughing on the inside, but also on the inside you're like, wait, what? You should never have your instructor up here being like, whoa, never seen that before. I honestly have never seen that before. So let's go look at the model. If it's accurate, it's giving me zeros. That's funky. I'll have to look into that. I have no clue why that's happening. None whatsoever. Wow. That's so weird. Oh, here's one reason. I have zeros here as well. It's like it didn't calculate properly. That's so bizarre. So in cases like this, what should you do? Email Gasconation? Rerun it. And I'm going to rerun it without the consistent and see what happens. Yeah, I just ran bootstrapping again. I mean, there's a lot going on. Something may have gone wrong in the process. There we go. It worked. So if all else fails, try again. Go to your model. And here we go. Here's what happened. Okay. What we have here are the T statistics, the critical values, everywhere. None of these are regression coefficients or regression weights or anything like that. These are T statistics. A T statistic, typically, if it's greater than the absolute value, or if its absolute value is greater than 1.96, that is the threshold for significance at 95% confidence level. One-tailed, right-tailed, I think. Maybe it's two-tailed. I can't remember. Anyway, these are way more than 1.96. They're significant. Not even close. Not significant. Pretty close, but not significant. This one we saw earlier, not significant. This one's bigger, significant. So you can see what is and is not significant. You can also go look at the report for the p-values. It'll tell you for sure which ones are and are not significant right there. So you can see the T statistic and how it compares to that significance level. But that's it. That's how you get those p-values. Now we're going to go back, unless there are any questions, but we're going to go back and do all the stuff, the factor analysis, the mediation, all that stuff. Okay. Okay, here we go. Let's do a factor analysis. Go back to our model. A factor analysis, I'm going to steal some thunder from tomorrow, I guess. Factor analysis is an assessment of the outer model. It assesses whether these items really move together sufficiently to be called a latent factor together. That's the factor analysis in a nutshell. So the way you do that is you go up here to calculate, run the PLS consistent, and for a factor analysis, we're going to change some stuff. On the setup tab, we're going to connect all latent variables for initial calculation. What this does is, even though it doesn't draw all the connections, it assumes all the connections between latent variables, as you would in a covariance-based modeling software like Amos. You know how you covary all, you might not know, but for those who've used it, you covary all exogenous variables in those programs. That's what this is doing, just not drawing it. We're also going to switch from path to factor. That's where we want the weighting scheme to be focused, is on factor. Leave all those other things. Don't change the weighting up here. Just leave that as default. And let's run. It ran. And again, we're not worried about the coefficients in the structural or inner model right now, just the outer model. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down here and look at the outer loadings. If we have reflective factors, we want outer loadings. If we have formative factors, we want outer weights. If we have both, we're going to use both just for each factor separately, differently. So go look at outer loadings. And this is essentially a pattern matrix. Now Christian's gone ahead and color-coded this for us, but don't read too much into it. Red is anything less than 0.7. Green is anything above 0.7. We have an oddity here. This is what's called a Haywood case. It's where it's greater than 1, which shouldn't happen. So we'll have to take care of that in a sec. But as we look through it, really what we want to see is whether the loadings are fairly consistent in size and averaging out above 0.7. So if we look at this one here for anxiety, they're pretty good, except you got a couple low ones here and this oddball here. We'll take care of that later. Factor analysis is kind of weird. Everything you're doing in a factor analysis is interrelated and interconnected. If you change one thing, like remove one variable, it will change your entire factor analysis by some little amount. So we're going to go try to remove the worst item first, or address the worst issue first. Comp use looks pretty good, just somewhat low loading, not too bad. Decision quality, pretty good, except this one, that's uncharacteristically low for this group. Information acquisition, pretty good. This one drops it down. It's uncharacteristic for its group. Playful, that's pretty good. So, what should we address first? Yeah, I would do anxiety. It's the one with the lowest loadings there and causing the most issues. So, I'm not going to address this first, because that might just fix itself. I'm going to address these other items. Anxiety is at probably 1 and 3. We can separate this out. There you go. Anxiety 1 and 3. Now I'm not going to remove both at the same time. I'm going to remove one at a time because again it will adjust everything. Also, I'm okay removing items again because they're redundant. So I'm going to go remove anxiety 3, the lower of the two loadings. How do you do that? Go over here to your model, click on anxiety 3, and simply hit delete. And run it. Again, PLS, consistent, same settings. It's going to run. We're going to go again, look at outer loadings. Hey, look what happened. That Haywood case is gone. Yay. And now we still have that. It's not just that it's low up there, it's uncharacteristically low. All these other item loadings are pretty good. And then you have this big jump down to this other one. And what does that mean in terms of in terms of what's going on under the hood. I know this, you can't everybody see it, but if we had anxiety 1 here, and the distance between these things I'm going to draw are representative of how tightly they're correlated. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You've got these 8 anxiety items, or however many there were, and there's a tight clustering of correlated items here, and then there's this oddball who's not very tightly correlated. And so what we're doing, essentially, we're going to remove that guy there, and then we have a nice tight construct to work with. Again, because they're redundant, it's not a big deal that we're removing one. We don't want to remove too many, though, because you want enough to sort of triangulate, surround the latent factor. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of number 1 there. And run it again. And outer loadings. And it looks pretty good now. Looks really good. Is there anything else that we really want to address? This one's probably fine. If you average those out, they do average out above 0.7. I'm not too worried. We can go look at the composite reliability and see if it's sufficient, and the AVE, which we'll look at in a moment. Decision quality. We should address this. Yeah. That's pretty low. And look, we have so many of these items. There's enough to lop off a few. Let's go ahead and just get rid of whichever number that is. 13. Okay, let's go get rid of 13. Oh, I didn't run the consistent. Whoops. There we go. There we go. That works anyway. It's about the same anyway. Okay.
Now better.
That looks way better. I didn't run the consistent algorithm, so if your numbers are slightly different from mine, don't worry about it. Information acquisition, they're all 8s except this 0.6. So this is out of character. We could be justified in deleting it. It's still averaging out above 0.7. So should we, shouldn't we? Me. It's up to you. I'm going to.
Sorry, why our design is different.
Your results will be different because I accidentally ran the not consistent one. Let me run the consistent one real quick. Here we go. Here's what you should see. This one. So comp use, I'm going to leave. Decision quality, I'm going to leave. You know, yeah, I'm actually going to get rid of information acquisition. Is it 5? These are low enough that it worries me. So I'm going to get rid of 5. Oops. Okay. Information acquisition is fixed. Playful. Playful looks pretty good. I'm not too worried about playful. Usefulness looks fabulous. Okay. So now what we've done is we've sort of attended to the convergent validity of these factors. Convergent validity is the extent to which the indicators move together consistently and togetherly. What we haven't observed and what you might observe with your own data, with messier data, is you might see that useful 3, for example, doesn't load with all the useful items. It loads over here, or on its own over here. If that's the case, then what you might need to do is In SmartPLS, there's actually not a lot you can do except delete the item. In SPSS, there are things you can do to play with it a bit. Another thing you might see is, let's say you had a factor that had like 12 items on it, and this is fairly common. And you saw that they broke up into 3 separate factors. What's happening is there are actually multiple dimensions on that factor. And so you need to account for that and separate them and maybe turn it into a second order factor, which I'll show you momentarily. But for now, if it's normal, we're good. It looks pretty good. So we've addressed to some extent convergent validity. We need to address convergent validity all the way though. So what we're gonna do is come down here to construct reliability and validity. That one right there. This produces for us some very useful stuff. Okay. So to establish reliability, typically we use the Cronpex alpha, which should be above 0.7, or the composite reliability, also above 0.7. And the AVE is an estimate of convergent validity, and it should be above 0.5. If one of these was less than 0.5, we may want to go back to that loadings matrix and identify the low loadings and remove a few more items. But we're good here. Everything's up above 0.5. Everything's green above 0.7. We're good. Again, if it were not good, we want to go back to the loadings matrix and see where it was not good and address those items. Okay, that's convergent validity and reliability. We have to also look at discriminant validity. Again, I haven't talked about factor analysis, so this is sort of jumping the gun, but discriminant validity is when this set of items, these 5 items, are different from this set of 5 items. These move together, but they don't like overlap a lot. They're discriminant from each other. It essentially says that, so, for example, decision quality isn't information acquisition. It's something different. There's a measure for that, and there are multiple ways we can look at this. You can either, I should show you the easy way. There's a hard way too. Here's the hard way first, just cause. It's the traditional way though. Here's the traditional way. You take the correlation matrix. Somebody was asking me about the correlation matrix. Here it is. Whoever was asking me. Can't remember who it was. Yeah, here's the correlation matrix. It's the correlations between all the latent variables. Even if you didn't connect them explicitly, it connects them implicitly. So you can include this matrix plus the AVE. In fact, it does this for you over here. That's right. If you click on discriminant validity, here. Nope. Where did they put it? Oh, I can't remember where they put it. Darn. But no, this is it. This is it. Zoom in. This is the correlation matrix. And on the diagonal, it's not the correlation between the variable with itself, because otherwise it would be 1, right? Useful and useful should be a correlation of 1. So instead, on the diagonal, they put the square root of the AVE. And the criteria is this square root of AVE has to be greater than any of the correlations associated with that factor. We see we're getting pretty close here. This is a 0.757, so anything below it or to the left of it has got to be less than 0.757. Pretty darn close here, but we're good. It's discriminant. That we're good everywhere. Wow, that worked. Cool. And it should work. If you've done your EFA properly, it should work. But you can literally just copy this table, or invert it. Wow. Let me zoom out. You can go over here to copy to clipboard. You can copy in Excel format and just paste it in your report. Right here. There it is. Or paste it in Excel first. And then you have your evidence of discriminant validity right there. Cool. Again, the square root of the AVE, which is on the diagonal, is going to be greater than any of the correlations associated with that factor. That works. So that's a factor analysis in PLS. It's pretty easy, and they produce the table for you. I'm really impressed with PLS, SmartPLS lately. They've been listening to their customers, making things work.
So we can use any of these like cross-loading and corner liquid.
This is for what?
Corner liquid criteria.
Yeah, this is the Fornell Archer. Yeah.
And we can do HTML.
Oh, let's do HTMT. Thank you. Yes. So there's also this table right here. If you were to click on HTMT, this is a newer criteria for discriminant validity. What this is simplified. If we were to relate every latent factor to every other set of items from other latent factors, to what extent would they be strongly correlated? We want numbers less than 1 here. It's not actually a correlation coefficient because 1 would be perfect, right? It's another algorithm. But the idea is you want values less than 1 in the HTMT. And if they're less than 1, that indicates discriminants. They're separate. And if they're green, they're good. And so you see here, all of them are less than 1. And so we're good. This is a newer measure. You can cite the new partial least squares primer book by Hare and Ringel. I think I have that on the references page. Anyway, but I like this one much better than the Fornell Archer, which is a fairly old criterion from like 1981 or something. Okay. So that's it. That's discriminant validity, convergent validity, reliability. Is it less than 0.85 in the Hare book? Okay, yeah. Oh, 0.9. Okay. Yeah, on the website, I think they said 1. In some references, they'll say 0.9. Other ones might even be 0.8. Yeah. Cool. Then follow that book. Yeah, we do what the reviewers say because we want to publish. Yeah. Except when we don't do what the reviewers say. I've done that too. They don't like it, but sometimes the editor does. Okay. Got some fun stories with that. That's factor analysis with reflective measures. Let me show you with formative real quick. Let's say we had a formative one. I'm going to pretend that this comp use is formative. I'm going to switch it around so its arrows are pointing into it. Again, to do that, you right-click it, click on switch between formative and reflective. Now the arrows are pointing into it. Then go ahead and run it. I just use the PLS algorithm. I'm feeling less confident about PLS consistent lately. If we were to go to outer weights, it's the weights we want to look at, but only for comp use. Here it is. And what is the criteria? We can ignore all the others because they're reflective. But for the outer weights, for comp use, we want them to be not over 0.7, but just relatively consistent. So 0.5, 3, 2, 1, not very consistent. Of course, this isn't actually a formative measure, so I wouldn't expect them to be. But there are other ways we can look at it. We can look at their t values or p values. If we calculate bootstrap and just run it, it's thinking. Okay, if we go look again at the outer weights, now we have a good mess to look at, and we're only interested in comp use. These, can I highlight them? Nope. There we go. These 4 here. We want their p-values to be significant. They are not. That is a problem. Well, these 2 are. These 2 are not. So what that's telling me is these 2 indicators for this formative measure are not contributing anything meaningful to this formative measure. And so perhaps we should drop them. But again, dropping indicators for formative measures is a lot trickier. Because as soon as you drop one of those measures, it becomes something totally different. Because it's not; these are not redundant in a formative measure. They're summative. Together they form this idea. If you remove one, it's a different idea. So that's trouble. What do? Probably drop them anyway. Let's go look at one other measure here. Performative measures. We want to look at, where are you? Let's go back to our model, calculate, and I'm going to run the PLS algorithm one more time. And we're going to look for the VIFs, the variable inflation factors. If you look down at the bottom here, I just ran the regular algorithm this time. Yeah. Sorry, I keep switching back and forth between them. There's something down here called the collinearity diagnostics. Collinearity is the extent to which multiple variables predict the same movement in a dependent variable, the same variance. And so click on that, and we don't care so much about all the reflective ones. What we care about is the formative ones. We don't want these formative ones to be highly collinear, which they are not. Anything over 3, I think, is how they highlight it. Here we go. See, these 3s are highlighted, are not highlighted. Anything under 3 is considered not collinear, multicollinear. For our formative factor, we want them to be less than 3 because we don't want them to be useless, essentially, redundant with each other. We want them each to be contributing something unique. And so they're validated this way. It's good. But again, we had 2 that were no good. We might end up deleting them. But also, again, this isn't an actual formative factor. I just made it up. So that's how you do formative factors. Okay. Now, there's also second order factors. I think we should get into those now. Yep, let's try that. Okay, a second order factor. Let's pretend for a moment that decision quality here is actually 2 separate dimensions. Dimensions 10 through 12 and dimensions 6 through 9. They represent 2 distinct pieces of decision quality. Let's pretend this is the robustness of my decisions, and this is the swiftness to which I can get to those decisions. 2 totally different things, but part of decision quality both. So at this first order level, these are reflective and these are reflective, but at a second order level, it's probably formative. So let's look at that. How do we do that? The way we do it is like this. Click on latent variable at the top and create 2 new latent variables. Then I'm going to click on the select tool and rename these. I'm going to name this decision efficiency or something like that, decision efficiency. And this other one, decision robustness. Excuse me. And then once you do that, we're going to do what's called a repeated indicator approach. We're going to bring decision quality 6 through 9 again into this lower order factor. So it's repeated. And we're going to bring 10 through 12 again into this other dimension. So it's repeated. Yeah, 10 through 12. So all of these decision quality indicators are repeated at the first and second order level. They're reflective at both levels, but what happens is we're going to make the dimensions formative. I'm going to hide these, hide indicators. There we go. And then I'm going to use the connector tool at the top to draw a line from the first dimension to the second order. So, first order is reflective at for each dimension. Second order to here, second order is formative. Because these are different things. These are not interchangeable, but these are interchangeable, and these are interchangeable with each other, just not across both, yeah? So that's how it works. And this will run. The problem is what we're about to observe.
Hang on.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question? You have to hide the indicator, right?
Yeah, I just hid them.
But the thing is, it's formative, so.
Oops, I hid them all. Sorry. Show, there we go. Okay. So
Normally it's formed by the auditor. So
should these indicators be formative? Is that what you're asking? No? You're asking?
Should it have indicator? I mean, the second order.
Should this also have indicators?
Yes, because
yes.
It has.
Yes. So every latent factor has to have its own observed indicators in PLS. In AMOS, you don't have to do that. But in PLS, every circle has to have boxes in order to run. So yes, this does have to have its own boxes.
So whenever we draw the second order, formative construct. So we have to draw the first order reflective construct like that. Then
these could also be formative.
yes.
They could be. Yeah.
No. I mean, if we want to run the second order,
yes.
So we have to draw the first order construct first. For example, in this case, it's reflective construct.
Yeah, so in this case, we have a reflective at the first order, although it could be formative.
And we also have to insert the indicator.
Yes, and then we repeat the indicators at the second order. So anything at the first order must be repeated in the second order.
And in the same direction, for example.
Yeah, so if they're reflective here, make them reflective here. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. You could, though, have these formative here, and these formative here, and then
the second
switch it to formative. You can also have third order, fourth order. Well, actually, it goes this way, but it becomes a mess. Second order, I've done third order. I actually published a third order just recently, but it was a mess to take care of. Okay, so we now have this repeated indicator model. If we were to run this, what we end up with is some interesting stuff. Going back to the model, check this out. The loadings all happen, and they happen pretty well. Look, those look really good, actually. We have perfect R-square. That's curious. We have zero effect from others, 0.001. There's nothing going on, right? Yeah, the question is why? Why did it just break? The answer is this factor is being perfectly predicted by its dimensions. There's no room for anything else to predict it. And so it's a problem. What we have to do is generate factor scores to represent each factor with a single calculated score, which is essentially a weighted average, and then replace the entire model with those factor scores. Or we could just replace this one. Actually, that would work too. Roughly the same estimates would come out. Okay, so how do you do that? So the way you do that is calculate. Actually, let's see if it's in our output right now. It might be. I can't remember. Latent variable. Here it is, yeah. In our output, it's already there. And I clicked on, down at the bottom, I clicked on latent variable. And then it's the first tab. This latent variable, what these values are is the score for every respondent. There should be 378 of these. And it is the collapsed score of all of the, let's take this column, useful. There were, what, 7 useful items? Now it's collapsed to one weighted average. And same with playful. You'll notice, though, decision quality also has a collapsed one, even though it's second order, but so does decision robustness and decision efficiency. Every latent factor is now collapsed into a single thing, essentially ignoring all the regressions going on in the structural model. So what we can do is create a new data set out of this. So let's do that. If you export this to Excel right here, top right, Excel format, go open Excel, a new Excel, Control New, Control V. This is our new data set with just latent variable scores. And with these, what we're trying to do is remove the flooding out effect of that repeated indicator approach by not having any repeated indicators. And this is how we do it. So this is our new data set. We want to save this as a CSV file. This will be MC RMIT LVS, latent variable score. .csv. So you got to click on Save As Type, CSV. For those who didn't follow that, I'm saving this in our folder, and you can pull that in. And this isn't going to be relevant for everyone, which is why I'm going a little bit faster than usual. But you should find in our data folder, we have a new file, mcrmit lvs.csv. LVS is latent variable scores. And what we can do with this is we can create a new model with new data, or we can replace this one, but I don't recommend it. But in this same project, I can right-click the project, say create new project, call this whatever, RMIT LVS, and add our data, just like we did before. But this time, it's the latent variable score data. And this is all we get. It's just a few variables. Instead of having every observed item for every factor, it's just one for every factor. And then what we can do, if I open up this, is we can recreate the model. I realize I'm going too fast. Sorry. I get carried away sometimes. Do you want me to go slower?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. So you are following along. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Okay. What point do you want me to go back to?
Get latent variable data.
Before you
All right. How about we go back to this right here, the latent variable scores?
Yes.
Yes. So in the latent variable output, the first tab, these are the latent variable scores, the single score collapsed for each latent factor.
So, Kayla,
yeah.
The latent variable is I use for precise the message things that you see in the
Each of these circles is a latent variable.
Yeah, that is the score of the latent variable.
So each of these is a score for one of these circles.
Yes.
It's essentially the weighted average of all the indicators, correlations. Yeah. And if you click on Excel format, here top right, that will copy it to your clipboard, which you can then go paste in Excel in a new Excel workbook. Sorry, I know that was too fast. That was way too fast. Get carried away. Once it's pasted, save it as a .csv file instead of an XLSX, because the default's XLSX. Change it to CSV. And then once it's saved, you can now use it in a new model. Back in SmartPLS, you can right-click anywhere in there in the Project Explorer area and say, create new project, or a new path model if we want to keep it in the same project. And create a new path model. Maybe I'll do that. Create new path model. Cool. LVS. RMIT. So I created a new path model in RMIT. by right-clicking RMIT and saying create new path model. Named it the LVS version. And then we still need to pull in the data. Too fast? I can slow down. So you added the new model, right-click the new model and say import data file. And then go find that CSV file you created called LVS or whatever it was. And pull that in. Okay, just hit the OK for that. And you should have something that eventually looks like this. 2 path models, 2 data sets. Or if you create a new project, that's cool too. Okay. Just a warning, if you have multiple data sets in a single project, only one of them is going to be your active data set. It's the one that's currently green. If you want to change it, you have to right-click that other data set and select as the active data file. Okay, but we want the LVS right now. Okay, so I'm going to open up LVS RMIT by double-clicking that path model. It's blank just like it was before, so we have to bring in all those variables. I wonder, I'm going to learn something real quick. I wonder if I can copy this. I wonder if I can just like select them and copy them all. That'd be kind of cool. Click, control click, 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 control C. Nope, doesn't work. That would have been great. Oh well. Okay, so I'm going to click on latent variable tool, create 6 of them. Just like before. Rename them just as before. I'm actually not going to rename them right now because I'm just going to bring in the data. Notice our active data set is the LVS. Over here in the indicators, it's just those. We don't have all those indicators anymore. It's just the latent variable scores. So I can just pull them in.
We can simply copy the whole thing.
Oh, if you copy the whole thing, it works?
Yeah.
Ah, nice.
All you can do is right click on the path there and then copy it.
How do you open a new tab? Oh, double click the model. What you're saying in the old model, if I copy the whole thing?
On that.
Oh, I can right click.
And then
copy or duplicate. Ah,
copy.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's nice. I'm going to do that. There we go. Duplicate. Yes. And we'll call it LVS. There we go. Thanks. I learned something new today. And I'm going to delete this other one. No good. Delete. No, not duplicate. Ah! Cancel. Delete. There we go. Cool. That's awesome. All right. So now I'm going to double click this one, delete all the stuff I don't need by selecting it and hitting delete. Select, delete. Actually, can delete these first order dimensions as well. So I just want that. And then I just pull in the indicators, but it's only one. I don't need decision efficiency, I need decision quality. There we go. Don't need Rob, I need information acquisition. Playful. And useful. There we go. So it's just one for each. Fewer degrees of freedom. We're estimating fewer parameters. Each one of these represents the cluster of correlations we had before from all the indicators for each one. And because we are no longer repeating indicators here, we're not going to be swamping out the variance explained in this variable. And so we can now use other things to predict it. It's still a second order factor, just not modeled that way anymore. But it is a second order factor from our previous model. Okay. So if we run this, and go look in the model. Oh, wrong one. This one. There we go. Zoom in. Whoops. There we go. Okay. So now we can predict it. There's a regular R square. We have actual values here. This is what we saw before, right? Yeah.
Sorry, how do you just
Oh, sorry.
Factor for each.
Oh.
Yeah.
In the indicators, did you already delete the old indicators?
I did.
Okay, so you just click on the indicator tab right here, and then click and drag one out and one out. Yeah. But then after you run it, you get essentially what we had before. You may recall before we had about a 0.5 on this regression, and we had about a 0.0 something on this regression. We were explaining over 3, it was like 35.7% here. Fairly similar. But that is now accounting for the multidimensional nature of decision quality. Works. Cool. Okay. Anyway, when do you have to do that? Let me show you something. Because you don't have to do that really complicated approach every time. It's only when you have a second order factor. Whoops, what did I just do? Control-Z. It's only when you have a second order factor like this one here that is being predicted by other factors. If this were our independent variable, no problem. Nothing's predicting it. So we're not having a swamping out effect at all. No problem. So we can leave it as latent, which is great. For example, if anxiety here, if anxiety was second order, we could do the repeated indicator approach, and we don't need to create latent variable scores at all, because it's not being predicted. There's no swamping out going on. It can just stay latent, and we can assess our model like this. Let's take a little break.
Is there any change if we
Sorry, which question?
Is there any change if we use
Yeah, the direction has changed slightly because they're fairly similar. You see, you can't see it's too small, but the R squared is 1.3, which is what we're looking for, and this 0.5, which is what we're looking for. So they're roughly the same, but not identical. Oh, it's because so if it's reflective, yeah, you can do these for any, or you do the same one for any. Yeah, this is your own data.
Ông có thể làm ví dụ thôi, ông ví dụ như là một cái
đã là sao cần ở đời thì nó phải là sao được. Nếu con không tin tại sao phải không hoàn toàn có thể là reflective cognitive và cognitive reflective. Thế nhưng mà em hỏi là lý do tại sao mà từ cái ban đầu ấy, rõ ràng là cái ban đầu form tất cả cái này với nhau thì là reflective hết rồi, xong đến lúc bán ra cái này reflective thì lấy lý do gì để cái này lên cái này là sai rồi. Ý là ông dùng cái lý do gì để định luận cái đấy? Chỉ là ví dụ thôi chứ. Cái đấy thì ông đọc cái quyển nghe thì nó không nói cái đấy, cái bài đấy thì nói cái PLS nhưng mà chỉ là tôi muốn biết xem là hiện ông này sẽ nói là gì. Như sáng nay rất nhiều cái mà liên quan đều có reference hết đấy, theo cái citation đấy, sức trở cái nào đây nghe hay gì đó Yeah, so this is a good indication that there should be here.
Em chỉ lúc đấy chỉ vì quản em đi ra ngoài nên lúc lại về em mới thấy trước gì em thì em chỉ thấy tự nhiên bắn về có cái đoạn từ một factor mất hai factor thì là EFA, CFA thì là như thế EFA thì ra
Đối với các phần mềm khác thì sẽ được order. Như với PLS anh run the system order. Anh sẽ lấy cái indicator luôn. Thì ví dụ như cost order, indicator, cái số thì second order, nếu nó không chịu thì chỉ nói lên ngược lại thì đây
nhưng mà kia ví dụ như
dạ thì nào chạy nếu mà không làm cho anh chị lấy sau khi mình chạy
Okay, so tất là mình có all these Make sense? No. So all these indicators here, from over here, copy them again. As well, yes. So stay here.
em rất yêu tại vì là PLS này em thấy nhiều rồi số đầu điều hai này có liên quan nhau tức là tại vì em thấy là đang cắt từ cái đơn quyết định hoặc là cái việc phát triển của cái thì nó sẽ là cái lý do gì sau đó thế thì nó sẽ không có cái chuyện sẽ nếu mà bị thế thì người đi qua không được đấy thì chúng ta phải Israel thì Israel tự nhiên là trước kia Chị là thì là phải mất đi là đều
There we go. So this data set have the variables. And then the few database. Various ways. It'll be actually more it's all
The second one I copied it, and so I just run the you just run the
they haven't fleshed out. Now you just and then, yeah, so they're actually in running track and see if they're I love those. If it's formative, yeah, it's complex. It's a good
Exactly, yeah. We also said, I wanted to do 4 days. He said it's hard for 4 days. But you can't do individual tournaments, right? Yeah, yes. When did we stop for the break? 7. But okay. He himself said that's why. Oh, then I said he's for every game, so can we arrange that? Why not work tomorrow? Something casual, he has something coming or that kind of thing. Last time I did,
You can't take the so in the meeting finished. So let's send these people home. Yeah, he will post it on the YouTube as well, and then get copy to us so that we can see it. Linda and Mike. Mike Reed meant to come, but he said he's not well.
Okay, let's get started again. Sorry about the long break. Lots of questions. All right. Here we go. So, a couple things I didn't talk about. Let's look at this. Validating a second order factor. The way we validate the second order factor is not to look at the repeated indicator loadings. In fact, the repeated indicator loadings are a good indication, if they're poor, that it should be multidimensional. Again, if we ignore these guys here, and we just had decision quality by itself with all of its items loaded on it, if the loadings were poor, it might be an indication that they don't all belong together. They belong in separate dimensions. Now, with decision quality, it's actually reflective, and so this is imaginary, this is hypothetical. The loadings are actually pretty good. But for a second order factor, that's not how we would validate it. Let me hide these ones here. We would validate it by looking at these, the loadings from the first order to the second order. And so we look to see if these are substantial. If it's formative, we validate it the same way we would validate a formative first order. We look at their t-statistic and p-value, see if they're significant. And we look to see if they are consistent with each other. These are roughly consistent, 0.45, 0.6. They're not too far apart. And we look at their collinearity, the VIF, and see if they are multicollinear or not. See if the VIF is less than 3, just like we did with formative factor already. If it's reflective, we evaluate it just like we would a reflective factor. We look at its loadings here, and we want them to average out above 0.7. In this case, they don't. But again, this is formative direction right now. I could switch it, and I'm going to because we didn't talk about a reflective second order, but that's what this really is. Oops. Let me switch these around. Yeah. It's pixel perfect. Click on the arrow. I'm going to switch these arrows around like this, from decision quality to effectiveness or efficiency and robustness. So now this is a second order reflective factor with first order reflective dimensions, which is really the true nature of this construct. It is a second order reflective. And the way you evaluate that, first I got to select the active data set and run it. I probably should have used consistent. Oops, oh well. And here we go. And now I would look at these loadings, and sure enough, they're above 0.7. They're consistent with each other. The AVE, I would go look at the AVE for it, which is in the output here. Let's see, construct reliability and validity. Here's the AVE for decision quality. And it is small, sorry. and it is 0.654. That's above 0.5. I have a valid second order reflective construct. Also, when you have a second order reflective construct, notice the R square is just normal. It's 0.3. These effects exist. They're not zeroed out, flooded out. So if it's reflective, you can keep it. You don't have to do that second stage of doing latent variable scores. Just like if you have a formative independent variable at the second order, you don't have to repeat that. You don't have to do the second stage with latent variable scores. It's only when your second order formative factor is also being predicted that you have to do latent variable scores. Okay. We good? Yeah.
Yeah, just I have one question. For the model with no reflective direction, if we run in AMOS and we run in PLS, do we have the same result?
Oh, good question. If I run this in AMOS and in PLS, we will have the same coefficients? The answer is no. It's a different algorithm. Will they be similar? Yes. Will they be always the same similar? No, but close. But usually pretty similar. I have run into circumstances where it's like opposite, which is struggle for me as a theorist. I struggle with that. It should be the same, right? Most of the times it is the same. Weird cases, it's not. So use the software that gives you the right answer. I know that use the software that makes the most sense. That can be best justified. Okay. That's second order. Let's talk about mediation, moderation, multi-grouping. This is going to make a lot of what we talk about in the next couple of days somewhat redundant. I've already talked about factor analysis, and we don't start factor analysis till tomorrow. Okay, mediation. Let's go back to this model. Yes. No, this isn't factor scores. This is the original data. So let's use. For those who are following along and have made the model like this, go ahead and make this second order reflective. That way we can just use the latent model instead of the latent variable scores one. So use this model. To do that, again, go back to your old model here and then activate the other data set by right-clicking it, select active data file. And then this should all turn blue. And then, if you need to, delete those two lines and switch them around. Or just delete these two factors, and then you'll have a single factor there. Maybe I should do that. That might make life easier. Let's do that. I'm going to delete these two using the select tool. Deleted. Deleted. There we go. So we're back to this. I'm actually going to save this. There we go. I don't know where it's saved. It's probably not saved in that folder. I'll find a way to get it there sometime. Okay, we're back to this. This model implies mediation. Mediation is when the effect of an independent variable is transferred to a dependent variable through some other variable. So we're saying that the effect anxiety has on decision quality is explained by the extent to which they use all of the features of Excel, comprehensive use. That's our mediation hypothesis. The way you test that, it's actually mathematically it's pretty simple. It's just this times this. That's your indirect effect. The problem is we have multiple indirect effects going on. From anxiety, we can go this way, or we can go this way. And in all statistics softwares up until version 3.2.7 on SmartPLS, all of those were accounted for simultaneously, and you couldn't distinguish them. I actually had to write a separate plugin to make it work in Amos, and it still doesn't work in Amos without that plugin. But Christian Ringel said, "Oh, that's a great idea. Let's implement it." So we did. It was great. He listened. So now we can do it in SmartPLS, and it's super easy. So let me close all these other tabs here. Close. Yes. So many little things. Okay, just this model. So to do it, we need to do bootstrapping. And we'll just use the defaults we had before, except in the partial least squares, instead of on factor, we're going to switch this. It's going to move over to path. We are now focused on the paths, not the factors. So switch this over to path. And start. Just gotta think and think and think. Okay. And some magic happens. First off, we've seen this before. These are all the effects with their p-values. If we go down to this one, so excited. Specific indirect effects. This gives us every indirect effect individually. And indirect effect is just another name for mediation. So these are the specific indirect effects. The first one we talked about was anxiety to decision quality. Anxiety to decision quality happens in the first row and in the third row here. We can look at those effects, and the first one is not significant, p-value 0.67. Second one maybe, it's less than 0.1, but not less than 0.05. We can also look at the size of that effect. Here it is here, not very large, not very large. I should explain what these two are. Oops, there's the original sample, and then there's the sample mean. What these are, oops, sorry. What these are is the original sample is the first estimation of the model using the entire data set. The second one, the sample mean, is after doing all the replacing 2,000 times, what was the mean, the average estimate. So you want to use the sample mean, that's the more accurate one. And again, that is a very small effect. I wish I could need a pointer. That's right. Ooh, watch this. Oh, these don't connect. Never mind. Okay. I used to have a cane. I haven't used my cane in 3 months. I can point with my cane. Anyway, this one right here, 0.089. Not significant, very small effect. We could actually go look at the F squared, the effect size, see if it is meaningful, but it's probably not. The only statistically significant indirect effects are from playfulness to information acquisition through usefulness, and from playfulness to decision quality through usefulness. Usefulness is the only useful mediator. Now, before we had specific direct effects or indirect effects, we would just see that there were indirect effects that were significant. We wouldn't know which mediator was actually doing the mediation. Now we do. Ah, great. And that's it, super easy. Yep.
Just have to
Hmm?
There's a 95%.
Yeah, if we're using the 95% threshold. Oh, there's also this one.
Yeah,
It's just
playful computer. Yeah, that one is also significant.
Yep, that one's also significant.
0.05 less than.
Cool. But you see the effect is very small. You know what we should do? We should talk about effect sizes real quick. So we see this effect is very small, which is fairly typical of an indirect effect. Because you're multiplying 2 decimals together, it's going to be a smaller decimal. But it should still be meaningful. Let's go see if this very small yet significant indirect effect is actually meaningful, has an F squared of a substantial nature. So the way to do that is, excuse me, think. I just made this video. I just made a lot of videos. They're all in my head right now. Where'd it go? Path coefficients. I might have to just run the algorithm actually. Calculate, PLS algorithm, start, and there it is, the F square. So you have an F square here. Let me zoom out. Oh, that is really hard to read. Wow. We'll go to the matrix. Okay, what we have here, the F-square. The F-square is an assessment of the oomph. What's the contribution? The contribution of a particular predictor on a particular dependent variable. So, for example, the F-squared of the effect of information acquisition on usefulness, other way around, usefulness on information acquisition is meaningful. It is above 0.15, which is the threshold here. And so it is a meaningful contribution. It's even more contributing to decision quality. It's a good F-squared. That 0.4 is very good. Something like comp use on decision quality, 0.004. Very small F-squared. Very small effect. Do we get to see the indirect effects here? I don't know that we do, actually. Anxiety on, no, was it anxiety on decision quality? Nope, we don't get to see it. That's unfortunate. For those of you, let's say in the future, Christian decides to implement indirect effect F-squareds, the threshold's lower. For a meaningful effect, it's 0.02 F-squared instead of 0.15. If you don't remember that, it's on the video. Or it's on his website. Yeah? Sorry, say that again?
Is it possible to calculate indirect effect?
The indirect effect between the variables.
There is an option.
They are here. And here. So yes, we just did. I don't understand the question. I'm sorry.
I'll explain it.
Okay. Okay, we can do that. Okay. Excuse me. So that's effect size. Essentially what goes on with that effect size calculation is it takes the R square here, 0.32 or whatever. It deletes a path and then checks the R square again and looks for the difference. If the R square changed a lot, then the F square is big. If the R square changed not at all, then the F squared is very small. So the effect is minimal. If I can delete this path and I still explain the same amount of variance, then obviously whatever effect this is having is nominal. It's not even meaningful. So the F squared is going to be small. That's how it's calculated. Okay. That's mediation. That happened way faster than I expected. Great. Let's do moderation. Moderation is broken up into two different types. You have continuous moderation through interactions, where your moderator is not a grouping variable. Maybe I should start with grouping variables. You have grouping variables such as gender, marital status, industry, job type, whatever, category, student versus faculty or whatever. And you want to look at the model from those two different groups and see how those two models compare. The other type is where you have an amplifying or dampening effect. Let's say we think that playfulness has an effect on usefulness, but that positive effect is dampened by anxiety. That makes sense. Then this is a moderator to this effect. And we can multiply this by this and predict, using that new product variable, we can predict this and see whether it is amplifying or dampening the effect. So multi-group versus interaction. Let's do interaction first. It's fairly straightforward in PLS. To do it, let's do the one we just talked about. Right-click usefulness. And we can add a moderating effect. And you're about to see why using Amos for complex models is not feasible. If we add a moderating effect and select the moderator is anxiety. The independent variable is playful. There are many other options here. We're going to go ahead and, for the sake of blowing your mind, use the product indicator approach. the two-stage approach it removes some of the complexity, but also removes a lot of the degrees of freedom and the error estimation. So, anxiety and playful product indicator. Let's keep everything else the same. I'll talk about some of these other things on Wednesday, when we talk more about moderation. Hit OK. What it does, it produces this. Here's where it gets complex. If you were to right-click this and show its indicators, yeah, it has a lot of indicators. It's every pairwise combination of anxiety and playful. That's massive. Yeah. So if you were to do this in Amos would break. Your computer might break. So don't do this in Amos. Also, you'd have to do it, and there's no like button for it in Amos. Yeah, I can repeat these steps. Yeah. So let me do that real quick. To repeat this, anything you want to have a moderation effect on, the dependent variable in this case, you would right-click. After you right-click that endogenous variable, you'd add a moderating effect. In that, you have to select what the moderator is. In this case, it's anxiety, and the independent variable is playfulness. Select your calculation method. We use the product indicator, which multiplies everything. The two-stage approach, what it does is it actually calculates latent variable scores for them first, and then multiplies them. So it's just one indicator and one indicator multiplied, instead of 5 and 7 or whatever it was. So little better in terms of complexity, a little bit less accurate in terms of the scores. Okay. And then hit OK. It produces that thing. And we haven't done anything yet. We actually have to run it. So we're going to run it with the PLS algorithm. Start using the path method again, path weighting. And what we have down here, a couple things actually. We can look just at the path coefficients. The interaction, where'd it go? Here's the moderation. Its effect is 0.092, fairly small effect. And it is evaluated at the same level as regular predictors. So it is a kind of a small effect. Is it significant? We don't know yet. We'd have to go look at the p-values. But if we want, also down at the bottom here, is something called simple slope analysis. What this does, it'd be easier to show you and then talk through it. So let me click on this. What it does is it makes a mess. Let me copy this out to the clipboard. I'm going to click on chart here and just hit OK. Again, that was chart up top right. And then hit OK. I'm just going to paste this in a Word document because it's easier to look at. So it formats better after it's pasted for some reason. What it does is it calculates the regression between playfulness and usefulness when the moderator is at its mean, when the moderator is at 1 standard deviation below the mean of the below the mean, and when it's 1 standard deviation above the mean. So let me interpret. The regular relationship, forget the moderator, the relationship between playfulness and usefulness is positive. There's a positive sloping line. The red. Did I get, yeah, the red. The blue line is the standard deviation below. So what happens is this line, it's tilting downward when you have more anxiety. What does that mean? It's dampening the positive effect of playfulness. When you have, actually, I got that backwards. That's the low end. This is the high end. 1 standard deviation above the mean amplifies the positive effect. Oh, this is weird. Okay, so that means the more anxious you are, the more playfulness has a positive effect on usefulness. Weird. Yeah, that is cool. Interactions are wacky. So as your anxiety increases, green line, the direction, the slope of the line increases. Cool. More anxious, more playful, better outcomes. Those who are just cool with things, their playfulness is just actually dampens the effect of playfulness. Weird. Does that sort of make sense? Maybe. But that's what this tells us. Cool. Now, is it actually significant? Because we can show this picture, and it's really cool, and something's going on, but are these differences actually different from zero? The null hypothesis, right? So let's go find out. Are they different from zero? Let's go do a bootstrap. Before we do, though, check out the F-squared if you want. The criteria is also lower for a moderator in terms of the F-squared. All right, it's really small. Here we go. What was it? Moderator. So this has got to be greater than 0.02. That's for a moderator, the F-squared is expected to be small. So it's not. This is sort of a mildly weak moderation effect. But let's go to do a bootstrap to find out if it's statistically significant. Now, you may notice it's going really slow. Because we used the product indicator approach, we added a lot more complexity to this model. So it's going to run a little bit slower. A lot more parameters to calculate. Again, if you were to do this in Amos, exponentially more complex. And so it would be going way slower if it ran at all. Okay, here are the p-values. And the answer is moderation, not significant. So that fascinating graph we just looked at, despite it being fascinating, it's sort of counterintuitive. The reason it's counterintuitive is because it doesn't actually exist. There's no significant moderation going on here. So these lines could be in any direction they wanted. It's still no different from zero. So you can't infer anything off of this graph because there's no real effect going on. Okay, no real effect different from zero. That's interaction. Questions on that? Yeah.
Do we check model fit for?
Model fit. I haven't talked about model fit. Let me talk about model fit. Any questions on interaction before I talk about model fit, which is a whole nother can of worms?
I think you have me to run the graph now. I don't know how.
Interpret the graph again?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Because this is a terrible graph to interpret because it's counterintuitive, but I'll talk about it again. Blue line is a low value for the moderator. Green is a high value for the moderator. So let's look at them one at a time, starting with red. Red is no moderator. The relationship between playfulness and usefulness is positive. That's what we know that. X to Y is positive. At a -1 standard deviation, blue, low, at a low value of the moderator, that positive relationship is dampened. Which means as anxiety drops, the effectiveness of playfulness increases. Yeah, weird. Again, no different from zero actually, so not weird, it's just nothing. Yeah. For the green line, high value of the moderator, meaning high anxiety. As anxiety increases, did I get that right? As anxiety increases,
The relationship increases.
have I had that backwards the whole time? You all just been thinking he's got that backwards? Did I get it backwards?
I think one of them.
I think I said it backwards. The slope of the line is increasing here, so the effect of playfulness and usefulness is better. Yeah, wait, you guys let me go on this whole time? Like this? Ah! Now you're thoroughly confused. Okay, my bad. This is a dampening line, this is an amplifying line. Yeah, so you're not crazy. I am. Yeah, okay. So this is one below, this is one above. This is low value of the moderator is dampening, so less anxiety means less positive effect of the playfulness on usefulness. So this isn't counterintuitive, this is totally intuitive. Nope. Oh my goodness, we had it right. Now you're so confused. Okay, it's because it's a negative moderator. It's the triple negative we're playing with. Okay.
Do you mean that when the moderator is negative?
No, not when it's negative. When it's low. Blue is low moderator.
Low moderator.
When anxiety is low,
Yes.
playfulness has a less effect on usefulness. Has a less of a positive, has a less strong positive effect. That's so hard to word. If you want to word, I can phrase it in one sentence. Anxiety strengthens the positive effect of playfulness on usefulness. That's what's going on here. Anxiety strengthens the positive effect of playfulness on usefulness. But again, we cannot reject the null hypothesis, so actually nothing's going on. Sorry about that confusion. We were right the first time. I'm not going to blame you, it's me. Yeah.
So the PLS can take moderator as that variable multiple indicators.
Yes. Oh yeah. So what if, let me go back. What if instead of anxiety, what if we had age or income or a single indicator, right? Yes, we could do a moderation effect with that. Let's do it. Because actually, didn't we have in our model?
So in animals, so with the multiple indicators, it's hard to.
Yeah, in Amos, it's really hard if you have a latent moderator. You'd have to cross multiply them. In Amos, you'd have to take it out of Amos, stick it in SPSS or Excel, standardize all the variables, multiply all of them, get the 50 new product indicators, and then put it back in Amos, and then pull in all of those indicators into a single latent variable, just like we saw here. Yeah. But you could also just create like a two-step approach, like we saw, where you create the latent variable score first, and then just multiply the two latent variable scores. I should show you that. Let me show you real quick. Not in Amos, in PLS. Okay. Don't follow along, just watch here. If I do a moderation effect, and instead of using the product indicator, I use a two-stage approach. This is essentially what you do in Amos. Is you would create this, which is just that. Its only indicator is playfulness times anxiety. Where did it get playful? Where did it get anxiety? It created a latent variable score for them, like we did before with the second order formative thingy. It created latent variable scores for them and then multiplied those together instead of all their indicators. So that's what you do in Amos, so you keep it from being too complex. So it's possible.
Is averaging the indicators very?
Yeah, weighted averages. Yeah.
Then like only one indicator. If you have 7 indicators, just take the average.
It just collapses it into one.
Yeah.
And then multiplies that one times this other one. It is okay. Yeah.
If I have 3 moderators, then I need to check moderating on each link. So in that case,
If you have 3 moderators?
age, gender,
Oh, so yeah, if you have 3 moderators, we got to create 3 moderating effects. So let's do that. Let's do that. We'll do 2.
for all the links, all the different items separate or all together.
We can do them all together in separate moderating effects, not all the same latent variable. So let's do it. And I'll answer your question as well about continuous single indicators. So let's bring another latent variable in here. I clicked on latent variable, click down here, and I'll actually do one more. So let's do 2 latent variables, move them around so they're out of the way a bit. One of them is going to be age, I think. Rename. Was it age? We go back to our model here. It was it was experience. We were going to control for age. Well, for fun, let's throw age in here anyway. And experience. But each of these is only a single indicator. And drag age from the left over here, drag age into age, drag experience into experience, and then I'll use the connect tool like before to drag, click, drag, click. They only need to point at the thing that is involved in the moderation, the dependent variable involved in moderation. In this case, the dependent variable would be usefulness if it's moderating the effect from from playful to usefulness. So we make it the same way. We right click, add moderating effect. The moderator in this case is going to be age. The independent variable is playful. And we can use either approach. I'll just use the two-stage because it'll keep it simple. It creates one, and I'll do another one. Right-click useful again. Add moderating effect. Instead of age, it's now experience and playful. Two-stage, just like before. So now we have two moderating effects. And if I open these up, it used the two-stage, so it's just the latent variable score of playful times the moderator, which was only one indicator to begin with, age, because I used the two-stage approach. Okay. And now we can run it just like before. And get the effects. And the effects are negative 0.057, negative 0.17. These are very small, probably not meaningful moderation effects. Again, we can check the p-values doing a bootstrap, just like we did before, see if they're significant. We could plot their slopes, see if they're meaningfully like moving directions on those slopes. That's how you do it. Yeah. Sorry? Oh, if you use Process, the plugin for SPSS, will you get the same result? The answer is no, you definitely will not get the same result. Here's why. Process doesn't allow for latent factors, and so it will be different because these are latent, and in Process it'll be latent variable scores or averages. Yeah, so let's say it's significant in Process and it's not significant here. Which one do we use? Process, obviously. You want the significant result. But realistically, I use whichever one is better suited to the task. If it were me, even though it was significant in Process and not significant here, I would still use SmartPLS because it's counting for a more accurate representation of reality, whereas Process is collapsing so many things. So that's me, but you can use either, and it'll be accepted.
Let's say if we use age to moderate the relation between usefulness and information. Do you think the first moderation effect will affect the second moderation?
Oh, okay, yeah. Essentially, should we be doing these at the same time, or should we do them separately? And the answer is you could do either, and they may have an effect on the other. In fact, if we look at this, the negative 0.017, let me delete this other one. Run it one more time. Run. And you'll see it probably changed ever so slightly. There we go, 0.029. Yeah, it dampened the other's effect, just slightly. Cool, so something to keep in mind. And can you run them separately? The answer is yeah, you can. You can run these separately.
But then if the under can say like why haven't done altogether?
Yeah, so you just got to be able to wordsmith that. And the answer I would give is it's known that interaction effects tend to be small, and so we wanted to assess them in different models in order for them not to swamp out each other's effects. Wordsmithing, that's how you publish. Also doing good research, that helps. Okay, let's do next. How y'all doing? Are we doing all right? We need a break, we're good?
5 minutes break.
Okay, let's do a 5-minute break.
Just stand up and walk around maybe just 2 minutes.
Yeah, a couple minutes. It's heavy stuff. run away. If I keep moving, nobody can pin me down. So let's see. We just ran. If when you run it, you use PLS consistent, and you go to factor, and then start. Let's see. Also connect. This one, sorry. Connect all latent variables for initial calculation. Start that. Here's the output. If we go to latent variables, here's the correlation matrix right here. So it's the default view of the correlation of the latent variables. If you use PLS consistent, if you use PLS regular, the default tab is actually going to be the latent variable scores.
So this show like anxiety, anxiety and dual form. It shows negative correlation.
Yeah, anxiety and what?
Anxiety and
decision quality.
Decision quality.
Negative point. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. But again, these are not the same as a regression weight, and the regressions account for everything else. I actually don't have a connection between anxiety and decision quality, but latently they are connected. Hidden. There's the matrix. Yeah. But it's not accounted for when we do all these regressions.
So I need to go to. Can you see again?
Show you again. So calculate PLS consistent, and then connect all the latent variables, and do it on the factor. And after you run that, it'll be if you go down to latent variables here.
This thing is not discussed in that book here.
No, it's not. There might be a new feature. I don't know. Anyway,
but examiner can say like you need to see correlation between, because U-type model is standalone model.
Yeah.
So correlation between different variable is not discussed by Venkatesh. So they can say like your population is Australian population. So can you run and show us just in case?
Just in case, yeah. But now you can. There we go.
But I noticed in your videos you are quite lenient, like you say like, okay, yes, if you mark my thesis, maybe I can get you.
I'm a very easy examiner. I am the best editor you'll ever have. That's good enough. Good enough. Yeah.
Otherwise, I had seen like in my school, students are getting horrible feedback. They say like, run this, I'm just getting prepared for everything.
I'm so sorry. Yeah. So let's go back to our model. So if we had a second order factor here, and because it was a second order factor and it was formative, what happened was we had perfect predictability here because our square was 1. We had 0 effect, even though here it was a massive effect. It turned to 0 because it was already being predicted by its dimensions. So what we have to do in that case is use latent variable scores. But if it were reflected at the second order instead of formative, if we had a formative, it would reflect. That wouldn't happen if we just like this perfect problem. You have to do it, or if it were back here and it wasn't being predicted by anything, it's also fine. Even if it's formative, because nothing's predictable, so there's no strong data. Because there is no strong data. Okay, so moderator doesn't influence very good. Oh. These are the same thing?
Yeah.
These So you have to include language. If this affects this relationship, it has to be a language. Yeah, well, it can be influencing other things too. Anxiety is actually influencing this one too. But it's moderator. Oh, there is a positive. Okay. So what I would do is I would look at the wording of those items to see if this one is different from all the rest. Because my guess is this one is reverse of these ones. Yeah, but it might be the thing. Look
Yeah, which is
So no, my best guess is that the wording of that item just happens to run inverse to the others. So do you have the wording available?
Yeah. This is the other.
That's just weird. What's going on there? Did you run the PLS consistent? Because if you did, try the other algorithm. I don't think they fleshed it out. Okay. I think that the PLS guys haven't fleshed out the PLS consistent algorithm.
The other thing I was YouTube.
Oh, you're welcome.
Come from a creative background. I never imagined that I would ever do cost in my life. That's nice of it. It was a great help.
Hi. You again. Okay.
In the case
Oh, okay. The first order is formative, and the second order has to be formative at that point. They're arguing that having usually is formative in the second order as well. Same way we just did. So, I deleted it, didn't I? So you just reverse the arrows on this one, and then have the arrow pointing this way, but you still repeat the indicators here. Yes. Okay. Oh, there's a line. What? All right. So
how do you put this one?
How do I what?
The name of this one.
Yeah. How do I do it?
The one for the latent variable.
These are observed.
Yeah. And this one is
latent or unobserved. Yeah.
With my data, I don't have those. They might observe ones. But there's no variables.
There's no unobserved. That's normal in like finance and accounting.
Yeah.
It's totally normal.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, can I run the same model?
So in PLS, like with age and experience, it is just one thing, and you can do it like that. It's fine. Yeah, it's just one indicator. It's just like our model right here. Just like this one. All of them only have one.
And that's fine.
So PLS you can do that. PLS you can do.
Because I realize that I have
So if you have mediation moderation, yeah, you have to use SEM. So, but if you only have one variable for each one, Amos would be better. Yeah, and I'll show you. I'll show you Wednesday. Right. Yes. So what do you do with that? It's fine. So the question is, are you interested in change over time? Yes. So then you might want to create a new variable that represents that change. So let's say we have STI over time. What's the change in STI? Change in ROE over time. So we might want to create new variables, not just ROE 2001, 2002, 2003. What's ROE 2003 minus 2001? Yep. Yes. So what you need to do is be able to, well, unless you're doing longitudinal data analysis, which you are. I'm not teaching that in this camp. No.
Because normally I use if.
Yes. And I would recommend it. No. It is actually possible, but it's not made for it. Yeah, longitudinal data analysis isn't real easy with SEM. Yeah, cross-sectional, super easy. Yeah. Okay. I just have one from about my understanding about the I'm still wondering yeah, that's kind of confusing. It's very similar, right? I had the same question when I was a doctoral student. And so the control variable, it's the thing you want to account for, but you're not really interested in it. It's just like age or education or gender. Who really cares? Yeah, demographics or company size. It has a big effect, but you're not theoretically interested in it. But a moderator, it's something that's very interesting to you that changes the nature of a relationship here. So a control variable, we haven't actually done controls. Let's do controls next, and then maybe it'll make more sense when we do it. Let's do it. I'll do controls right now, and then you'll see. I hope. Okay, yeah. Okay, let's get started again. Sorry, every time we say 5 minutes, it ends up being 10 to 15. But I'm going to blame that on you guys. Lots of questions. More questions. It's okay. Yes. Yeah, we're going to do controls right now. We're going to do control variables right now.
Is it the predictor?
We'll do it right now. Here we go. You're good. Okay. Some questions came up during this break. Most relevant would be differences between moderators and controls. So control variables are those things that we have to account for, but we're not really interested in. Often these end up being demographics or of individuals or of like companies. A very good example is I submitted a paper a few years ago to a journal, and it was about value-based pricing in marketing. And we said that if you adopt a value-based pricing approach instead of a cost-based or a benchmark-based value pricing approach, it'll improve your performance. Essentially, we said X improves performance in a company. And the reviewer came back and said, no, you're wrong. Company size predicts performance in a company. And we said, yeah, probably, but that's not that interesting. They said, yeah, but if you don't control for it, you can't say anything predicts firm performance because you have not controlled for the size of that company. And it's shown in the literature, company size, number of employees, is the best predictor of firm performance. So no matter what you tell me, I can't believe you unless you control for firm performance. So theoretically, not very interesting, but absolutely necessary statistically. So we added firm size into our analysis as a predictor of firm performance. Sure enough, it was an amazing predictor. R squared quadrupled, and our original thing we thought would predict firm performance, it didn't. At least not very much. It was a very small effect. So we had to control for it. A moderator is different. A control, one more thing on controls. A control is modeled by pointing it right at the thing you want to control it on. If this were firm performance and I had to control for firm size, I would create a firm size variable and point it right at firm performance. Just like all these other variables. I'm just controlling for its effect. In fact, I'm controlling for the effect of usefulness right now. I'm controlling for the effect of playfulness because their effects are accounted for. They're controls too, but not really. They're just being controlled for. They are theoretically interesting also. A moderator is different. A moderator changes the nature not of, or doesn't predict exactly a dependent variable. It changes the nature of a relationship between two variables. And it is also theoretically very interesting, especially if we get into grouping variables, which we haven't done yet. It's another form of moderation. There is, let me rewind. My brain's all over the place. Rewind. We'll do interactions because we haven't talked about grouping. Let's say we have this idea of job satisfaction, our dependent variable, easy to understand, job satisfaction. Autonomy typically predicts job satisfaction, but you may find if you go into a company, anyone who's in HR or OB may know this, if you go into a company and assess autonomy and job satisfaction in a very technical area, there is no effect. And the reason is because there's a moderator missing, something that explains, that creates a very different effect for multiple groups. The moderator is training. If you give people autonomy on a technical task and they have no training, their job satisfaction does not improve. It actually goes down because they want direction. They don't know what they're doing. You can't give them autonomy and say, go for it, and then they have no clue what to do. But if you give people training and then give them autonomy, their job satisfaction increases. So there's this complex moderating effect, very interesting. Positive for one group, negative for the other group, and when you don't account for the moderator, they neutralize each other. There's no effect. And so very interesting theoretically, very different from a control variable. Like I said before, firm size, not interesting, but we have to account for it. Training in that relationship, very interesting, and we want to account for it. So that's the difference between controls and moderators. How would you model a control? Let's do one. In our model, we're controlling for age, frequency, and social desirability, which we'll talk about not today, because that's a whole nother can of worms. Age and frequency. So let's throw that in here. We already have age right here that didn't work as a moderator. I'm actually just going to bring it down here. Hide. Where'd you go? Hide. I'm going to bring it down here out of the way. I'm going to delete this arrow. Delete, delete. Pixel perfect. Come on, delete. I got to highlight it. It does not want to be selected. There. Got it. No, what did I delete? Control Z. I selected something else. Hey, I got it. There we go. And now connect it to our dependent variable. The question is, for now, I am accounting, I'm controlling for the effects of age on decision quality. We hope that people who are older, wiser, have more experience in life will make better decisions, right? We should control for age. Will it also affect information acquisition? Maybe. If it does, we better control for it. So I'm going to connect age to information acquisition. Now here's a tricky question. Will it also affect usefulness or comp use? Maybe, I don't know. If they do, if there's a possibility that age would affect those things, I would throw in more lines. Are they going to affect anxiety and playfulness? Maybe. If they do, more lines. Anything that age might impact, you have to throw a line in there for it and control for its effect, or else you're not controlling for its effect. Some people just put controls at the DVs. That's not correct. You got to put it on anything it might theoretically impact. I'm going to say theoretically, I actually think it only affects these two last ones because of our sample. If we're dealing with ages 5 to 85, I would say it has a bigger effect on more things. We're dealing with ages 19 to 23. So I doubt it actually has any effect whatsoever on anything. So we're controlling for that. Same with, what was the other one? Frequency. So we'll create a new latent variable. Stick it in here. Name it frequency. Oops. And then go grab frequency and drag it in. And then we want to control frequency. Frequency definitely has an effect on information acquisition. The more often you use Excel, better the information you're going to get out of there. It has an effect on decision quality. The more often you use it, better your decision should be. Definitely has an effect on usefulness. Probably has an effect on how many features you use. I don't know about playful and anxiety. Maybe it has an effect, maybe not. I'm going to say no for now. But I connected to those 4. There we go. Less mess. And now, what do? We run our model. And when should we include these controls? We should include these controls really from the beginning. At the beginning of our causal modeling. Unless they're latent, then we got to include them from the beginning of our factor analyses. But age and frequency aren't latent, they're just single items. So we should include them anytime we're about to test a hypothesis where we need to control for the effects of our controls. We should have these in here. Sorry, that's kind of a mess. Let me move it around. There we go. Okay. Oh my goodness. There are some effects going on. Age has no effect, like I predicted. I mean, there's nothing going on there. Likely nothing going on there. But frequency, look at this, 0.13, 0.27. Not really much there or there, but it definitely has an effect going on these mediators. So that's interesting. Cool. And we can look at their p-values if we really want to. We don't have to because we're really just accounting for their effects. So we're not really interested if they're significant or not significant. It doesn't matter to us. We're accounting for them. But you can report that if you want. But now, what we should have seen happen is we should have seen some of the effects change. For example, the effect of playfulness on usefulness most likely has dropped. I don't know what it was before. We can find out. The effect of anxiety on comp use most likely has dropped. Let's find out. 0.235, 0.032. If I delete this real quick and run it again. Yeah, so this dropped to 0.235, and that one's not meaningful anyway, so it doesn't exist. And the R squares dropped. It was higher with the control in there. There we go, 0.183 instead of 0.115 or whatever it was. Cool, so that's controls. Pretty easy in PLS. Just put them in, draw lines, and leave them there. Makes for a mess though. Okay. Any questions on that? Yeah.
So how do we explain the
How do we estimate the effect the controls are having? How do we explain? How do we explain the effect this one is having on usefulness? Is that what you're asking? I'm sorry, what?
So what it really indicates?
What does it indicate? Oh, easy enough. Frequency is the frequency with which you use Excel. You use it once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, every day, multiple times a day, things like that. As frequency increases, the frequency you use Excel increases. That's frequency. And what this says, this 0.273 says, is as my frequency of using Excel increases, my perceived usefulness of Excel increases. I find Excel to be more useful the more I use it. That's what that positive effect means. Same here. The more I use Excel, the more I use more of Excel. That's comp use. I use a lot of the features of Excel. Not just like 2 or 3 features, but like 20 features of Excel. That's comp use. So the more often I use it, the more of it I use. That's what those mean. Is that what you're asking?
So what?
I think so. Control variable just easily understood as predictor.
It is a predictor.
It's
yeah,
a predictor.
it's just a predictor. It's just like an independent variable.
Yeah.
And it's modeled the same way. We just sort of ignore it because we're not theoretically interested in it. Yeah.
So then how would you interpret it if you had a categorical control?
Oh. Ooh. Yeah, we can. Before I do that, because that's going to be procedural. Any other questions before I attack this one? Okay. So, can I what? Control variables in AMOS? Yeah, and we will. And the way you do it in AMOS is the same, almost. I'll show you. Don't worry. That'll be day 3. It's only day 1. Like I said, boot camp. It is intense. It is long. It is a slog. Your question. Question was, can we put categorical variables in as control variables? Because very often we want to control for things like industry, marital status, education level. These things are fairly, education could be modeled ordinally, but sometimes it's categorical. So yes, here's how you do it. I really, really want to show you. Let's make it easy. Trying to think of the easiest, fastest way to do this. Or I could explain it. I also have a video for it. What time is it?
4:20.
I want to explain it, not do it. I have a video for this, and I'll show you the video. I'm not going to show you the video. I'm going to show you where the video is. Real quick. If we go here, YouTube, not Yug. What is that? And if you were to search for, if you go, oh, it just went. If you were to just search YouTube for dummy variable SmartPLS, hopefully it'll be, hey, it came up, sweet. Categorical predictors via dummy variables in SmartPLS. It's the first hit. So this will walk you through in 6.5 minutes how to do it. But I'm going fast, nobody's watching, so it's easy. But doing it here would take way more than 6 minutes. Essentially what you do, let's say we have child order. Yeah? We want to control for child order. What we would have to do in SPSS first, I gotta rewind. Okay, you can't throw a categorical variable into a regression. Just throw it in. It doesn't work because a regression assumes a value difference as you change the value of the variable. In something like child order, we had 1 equals only child, 2 equals last of many, 3 equals middle of many, and 4 equals first of many. So the person who responded they were first of many responded with a 4. The person who says he's an only child responded with a 1. Does the person with a 4 have more child order than the person with a 1? That doesn't make any sense, right? Same with religion. If I were to code like Buddhism, Muslim, Christianity, Hindu, does the Hindu who responded with a 4 have more religion than the Buddhist? Well, maybe, I don't know. But no, not really, not in that sense. It doesn't have like 4 times the religion. So those numbers are meaningless with categorical variables. So you can't just throw it into a regression. What you have to do instead is break it into what are called dummy variables. So let's take religion's easy. Let's do religion. For Buddhism, I have 1 column in my data set, right, called religion. 1 is Buddhism, 2 is Muslim, 3 is Christian, 4 is Hindu. I'm sorry if I've missed your religion. I really apologize. Okay. I have to now create 4 new variables. 1 new variable for Buddhism. And that variable, the values are 1 if you're Buddhist, 0 if you're anything else. I have another variable for Muslim. 1 if you're a Muslim, 0 if you're anything else, including Buddhist. Another variable for, you see what I'm saying, Christianity and Hindu. And so a 1 indicates presence of the value, 0 indicates absence of the value. And now you have to include those dummies as separate Each one gets their own circle. We'd have 4 new circles here, each with one dummy indicator. And all of those predict whatever you need to account for here, like on decision quality. That's how you do it. I'm so glad I didn't actually do that on the laptop. That would have been a long mess. But that's how you do it. And then the way you interpret it is slightly different. Really, you just want to see if it has an effect. If it's controlled for, you're good. But if it has a significant effect, then you would say something like, being Buddhist has a significant effect on your decision quality. And you could actually run a t-test on that and see for those who are Buddhist versus those who are not Buddhist, what is the decision quality level? Okay. Okay. Here we go.
Is it the way that we do this are the covariant-based problems and for examining the effects of cases or written varieties on values?
I don't think I understood the question. Sorry.
It's like what you have explained. Is it applied the same for all the variant-based SEMs, such as AMOS or?
Oh, yeah, same with AMOS, same with M+, same with Stata. You can't just throw a categorical variable in there. You have to break it in dummies. Now, some programs, I think M+ will actually do it automatically if you tell it that it needs to be split into dummies. But AMOS won't, SmartPLS won't. Yeah. Okay, SAS might, SAS. Okay, what's left? We have multi-group effects. And I want to make sure we haven't missed anything else major since we're ending soon here. We've talked about effect sizes, mediation, interaction, not method bias, but we can ignore that for now. We talked about those. Really, it's multi-group is left. If we have time, we'll hit method bias. It's actually super easy, also irrelevant to some extent. Okay, so let's do multi-group. So we had in our model, our multi-group was gender. Male is 1, female is 2. That's why we code it in our data. The way you do this in SmartPLS is you go to, it's not intuitive. You have to go to the data set first. So I'm going to double click on the data set. Yeah, not intuitive. Okay, so again, you double click on the data set, not on the model. Get to the data. And then what you have to do is add data group. Or you could generate them. That's easy too. Maybe we'll do generate. Let's do generate. Okay, generate data groups. We're going to call this, I went to prefix it. We'll call it gender underscore. What that does is for all the groups it makes, it's going to make gender underscore 1, gender underscore 2, 3, 4, etc. And what it is we're going to go select for the group column, gender. Right here it says there are 2 unique values. And for group 2, again, gender. Apa? Wait a minute. Sorry, let me zoom out. There we go. I'm going to get rid of this one. Sorry. For now. It won't let me delete it. Ah. I'm going to cancel. Cancel. There we go. Let's just add data groups. It's easier this way. Okay. Add data groups. Group name, male. Where gender is equal to 1. And we're going to generate that. And we're going to generate one more. Hit OK. Going to generate a new one, add data, female, where gender is equal to 2. You can actually do some fairly complex stuff here, but I'm going to keep it simple. Hit OK. So now we have 2 data groups, males and females. If I zoom in, it says you have 91 females in this and 287 males. It was a technical class, and at BYU, we have more males in technical classes for whatever reason, especially 7 years ago or 6 years ago. So there's our data. Now we can run a multi-group analysis. So back to our model. If we go calculate, you'll see there is down here multi-group analysis. I'm going to click on that. There's a bunch of other stuff too that I'm not going to cover today. There are videos and tutorials on many of these, so you can enjoy those later. Clicked on multi-group analysis. It says, which groups do you want? I want group A to be female, I want group B to be male. What do I want to run? Partial least squares on a path analysis. You can also do an invariance test on the measurement model. We have time. We have time. Let's do this. Factor analysis first. So we're going to do it on the factoring and 2,000 subsamples. Hit start. What we're going to do, whenever you do a multi-group analysis, you have to actually assess whether the measurement model is the same across these two groups. If they answered your survey in relatively the same way. And if they haven't, well, that's a problem. Then you're comparing apples to oranges. Like, let's say we had 5 questions on job satisfaction, and males answered those questions very differently from females. Not just lower or higher, but at different distributions. Then this invariance test would say, hey, they didn't answer the same way. You can't say that this is job satisfaction because it means something different for males and for females. So you can't compare them. So we're going to do an invariance test right here. And if we go to outer loadings, because we have reflective, and we look at the PLS MGA tab, again, outer loadings down here, and then it'll come up with all this stuff. Go to the PLS MGA tab, and what you end up with is a set of p-values for the differences in the loadings. There's female minus male loadings. And is the difference between those loadings significant? We don't want it to be significant because that means they answered them differently, systematically differently. And looks like we're doing pretty good. If I click there, that doesn't sort them. I really wish it did. That should have sorted them. But I can scroll down. Hey, we're good. Wow, I'm impressed. I wasn't expecting that. Yeah, no significant differences, which means males and females answer these questions roughly the same way. Their loadings are roughly the same, and that's good. That means we can do a multi-group comparison at the structural level. If they were not like this, if they were actually significantly different, we would have to go and figure out, well, which items are they? Is it like all of the playful items? Are they all really different? If so, any interpretations we make with playfulness are subject to suspicion. They may be biased by gender. So we'd have to account for that in our write-up. We have to say it's a limitation. We didn't find metric invariance in the playful construct, but everything else was fine. So any interpretations or inferences you make off of playfulness are subject to bias. Okay, well that's that. We'll run it one more time with a path focus. Multi-group analysis, we already have it selected. Partial least square is going to go to path. Hit start. I can tell we're getting tired. We got to wrap up here. It's been a long day. Let's run it. Huh?
You still have 2 days.
I have 2 more days. I'm excited. We'll see if the crowd here is as big tomorrow. And the professors who attended today are probably rethinking their choices. Come on, it's almost done. You can do it. Maybe. There we go. Okay, so now we're looking at the structural model. Looking at path coefficients and the p-values here. Let me zoom in. And we want to know, is there a difference? Let me open this up a bit. There's male, there's female. Where'd you go? Where'd you go? Here we go. I want to know in the MGA results, PLS MGA. here are the differences. You can open that up to see that's what it says here. Female minus male on the structural paths. And is the difference statistically significant? We want them to be different. If it's a moderator, we're looking for differences in the structural model. And the answer is no. There is no difference, unfortunately, between males and females when it comes to these variables, relationships in this model. Men and women are the same. So there you have it. Yep. There will be a question. What if I have more than 2 groups? What if I have 3 groups? The human mind can only compare 2 things at a time. That's why it's called compare. Pair. That's the root word. Your brain doesn't do more than 2 things. We only operate in 3 dimensions, which means we can only compare 2 of those at the time. Your brain will not do it. Try it sometime. It hurts. And if you figure it out, write a book. So you can only compare 2 things at a time. So let's say we had male, female, and other. Yeah? We could only compare the male to the male to the other, and the female to the other, and the male versus all other, and the female versus all other, and the other versus all other. Only 2 groups at a time. You can't compare in 3 dimensions. So that's that. Okay, that's multigroup.
Is there any minimum sample size in each group?
Very good question. What's the minimum sample size required for each group? Unfortunately, sample size is the same criteria exist for multi-group analysis. So whatever your minimum requirement for sample size was before for the whole analysis, same criteria for each group. So we had, let's calculate real quick. We had we had 378, I believe, in our analysis after we deleted a few things. And that, I'm just gonna tell you, that was enough. In the subsamples, female only had 91. Question is that enough? I have a table right here to calculate it. Here we go. Let's see if we can figure this out. This table says maximum number of arrows pointing at a single independent, single construct, which means which variable has the most things pointing at it. This one has 3, this one has 4. Oh, 4, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we don't have any formative indicators right now, or formative measures right now. So 4 is the highest number of arrows pointing into a single thing. Remember that number, 4, which is right here. And what is the significance level we want? 0.5, or 0.05, excuse me. So that we're going to use this set of variables here, this row here. And what is the minimum R-squared we're willing to accept? I would say 0.25. And so the minimum we can have, the minimum sample size is 41 for any subgroup. So we actually have enough for sufficient statistical power. This assumes a statistical power of 80%. So we're good. You may notice these numbers are fairly small. Again, PLS will run with smaller numbers. It just will. For Amos, different. So for Amos, that's not how we would calculate it. For Amos, there are actually several different ways to calculate it. My favorite, most useful, is 50 plus 3x, where the x is the number of variables. So if we had, like in this model, we have show all. Where's show all? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Well, we have a bunch. In this model, we have, let's say 30, probably more than that. Let's say 30 for mathematics' sake. Say we have 30 variables, not constructs, actual observed variables. So we would have 50 plus 30 times 3. 90, 50, 140 would be our minimum sample size to run an Amos. There are actually other ones, 5x, 8x. Some are really, really liberal at 20x or conservative. I don't know how to, anyway. Yeah, so it depends on which paper you're citing. Actually, it depends a lot on error.
So the irrespective of the number of observed variables, the fit is common, right?
Well,
If you have 60 items,
yeah.
then the load formula should be 50 plus 60 times 3.
Yep, 50 plus 60 times 3. Unless you're using more conservative, less conservative formula. For each of the groups. Yeah, so if you have male and female, each of those groups has to have that minimum.
For example, if my variable, it is not like, we don't expect this in each group. In each group we expect more. In another group we expect less. This is theory says, and my data says the same thing. That is what we do.
You could, as long as you had the minimum threshold, you can still do it. You just got to meet that minimum threshold of sample size. Is that what you're asking? Sorry.
So it's like 50 plus 3. Let's say I have 26 indicators.
Okay.
Variables. So 26 into 3, so 78.
Yes.
Plus 50, so 120.
Yes.
So I have like in one group I have around 80.
Too low.
Yeah.
You can still run it, but you would, so that when you have less than the minimum sample size required, the risk is, and we haven't talked about statistical power, but the risk is statistical power. Statistical power is the ability to detect significant effects that actually exist. When you have low sample size, you might not be powerful enough to detect significant effects. And so you have false negatives, meaning you said something was not significant, but in fact it really is. You just didn't have enough sample size to detect it. Does that make sense? False negatives, which is a type 2 error. Not that you need to know that. Yeah. Okay, last thing. We have time for one last thing. And then we'll do some, if anybody needs one-on-one, we can talk. The last thing I was going to show you is method bias. Some of you may have heard of method bias, may have been required to assess method bias. Method bias is, if you go back, do you remember that, the wave slide? Method bias was the last one. It's the bias that is influenced by something. Let's say we're sending a survey to our company. And I have employees who are loving their life, loving their job, and I have employees who hate their job. Right? If I send them the same survey, regardless of how they really feel, what their actual trait is, I will have inflated scores from those who like their job. Now I have deflated scores from those who don't like their job, no matter what the question is. For example, a very good one is you can ask about companies' innovativeness, innovative practices, potential. People who love their job will answer, yeah, my company is really innovative. We're going places. We're doing great financially. They're just going to answer positive everything. People who hate their company, no, it's not an innovative place. No, it's not going anywhere. We're doing terrible. And so this is method bias. There is a biased way to answer those questions based on loyalty to that company or whatever you want to call it. And so you have to account for things like loyalty. Or we were talking about corruption earlier. Assessing corruption is very tricky. People are not going to say, yeah, I love killing people. Or yeah, I love bribing. I'll take a bribe if somebody offers it to me. Nobody's going to say that. Well, most people won't say that. So you have to account for what's called social desirability bias. There's a socially desirable way to answer those questions. You have to account for that so you can parcel it out when you run your analyses. So there's a way to do that. In AMOS, in PLS, there's only a way to detect it, not a way to remove it or parcel it out. So the way to detect it goes like this. And really it's a poor substitute, and it's not great. And it's only detection, and it's a false detection. So with all that in mind, if somebody asks you to do a method bias test in PLS, here's how you do it. As a reviewer, I would never, ever ask you to do that in PLS. But, so how you do it? You run your model, PLS algorithm, run it at the factor weighting scheme. I'm going to ignore groups right now. Okay. And what you got to do is go down to the very bottom here where it says quality criteria, collinearity statistics, VIF. We've looked at the VIF already. The question is, are there any VIFs between latent factors, not between their items and them, but between latent factors? So none of these, none of these. So I should have done it at path level. I'm sorry. Let me do the path. My bad. Run this one more time. Calculate PLS path. There we go. Start. Here we go. Collinearity and inner VIFs. Okay. In this matrix, if there's anything over 3, that is an indication of potential method bias. The reference for that is Ned Cox's paper. I have it on the stat wiki here. Right here, Control F. Oh, it's actually this one right here. Ha, Cox. Common Method Bias 2015. But he says on page 7, I believe, he says that anything over 3 is an indication of method bias, potential method bias. If it's over 5, it's probably pretty serious. If it's over 10, you have a serious problem with method bias. But 3 is that minimum cutoff. What we've done here is sort of the liberal approach at detecting method bias. If you want to be like super rigorous, what you would do is actually mess up everything by deleting all the paths and then pointing every variable at one at a time and running VIFs, checking them, deleting all those paths, and running them all into another variable, all the paths. And you do that one at a time across all of these, including the independent variables. And then you'd be able to say for all variables, all VIFs were less than 3, which means we have no chance of method bias according to this approach. Okay, yeah.
We have the same thing in Amos.
Amos, there's a much better way. Yeah, much, much better way. And it actually is more relevant. If you have formative factors, you're less susceptible to method bias. If you have objective measures like profit, share price, things like that, actual measured things, not perceptual measures, then you won't have method bias. You can't. It's objectively measured. It's only when you have all perceptual measures that this is a problem. Yeah.
So it's going to be the outer and the inner VIF above 3?
Just the inner VIFs, yeah, above 3. Okay, that's all I have for you today. I think, I hope. Tomorrow, all factor analysis. We've talked a lot about factor analysis today, so we'll see how tomorrow goes. I've never, again, had a boot camp where we started with PLS. So we'll see how tomorrow goes. Maybe it'll just be like review. So tomorrow, speed me up, slow me down as needed. We may just have extra time for one-on-one. Who knows? So we'll see. Go rest.
Thank you very much, everyone. So tomorrow we continue and day after. Tomorrow we will finish at sharp because we have some